What's going on, everybody? Giving everybody a chance to join. Figure today's as good a time as any to talk about before we get back to MetLife. All right, let's get some people speaking right now. Nikki Snacks, how you doing?
Do you want my honest answer, or you want me to just tell you, you want me to lie to you?
I mean, I want you to start however you want to start, and then I want you to give me the other answer.
I'm gonna be quiet for quite a while, guys, but I'm in here.
All right. Well, I really hope we get some more murder talk tonight, but I'm doing okay. I've come back down to earth a little bit and back to reality, so I'm not having a bad day. But other than that, I'm as miserable as always, and I hate life. And yeah, that's pretty much what I got there. I guess watching the Rangers get their ass kicked right now, so that's good too. But other than that, everything looks good.
All right,
I mean,
I
it
like
doesn't,
that.
but
You've got two prongs of sports misery now that the Yankees are eliminated. Actually, I mean, you've got the Rangers just picking up slack for the Yankees, but the Knicks are back.
the Knicks are back. That's about all I got left.
Pest, Greg, how you guys doing? And if anybody else wants to speak, please come on in and request to. We're going to try to rotate through as many speakers as we can. We've got a lot of guests who are going to be coming tonight. We should have a lot of fun.
Some could call it fun.
Greg, what's going on, man? How you feeling? Or is that Aiden who's speaking?
Both of us. Hello there. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Aiden.
Right. Yeah.
Rough the Giants fan. I mean, just after every year after a big win and everything, then things we have hope again, and then it just comes away, goes back. It's just tough.
Yeah. I know. But we're gonna try to focus on some good things. We're gonna definitely talk about Kadarius Toney. We're gonna talk about Daniel Jones. We're gonna talk about Andrew Thomas. Pest, anything you want to talk about?
I heard, Daniel Jones could play this week, but he didn't practice today. But at least we could have him. It sucks that Galladay is going to be out for a little. Saquon's going to be out, but we do have some positives. Shepard coming back, Slayton, Jabril Peppers.
Pest, what's going on, man? Talk to me. You're on mute, by the way.
He's disposing of a body, Will.
Okay, yeah. Colton, how you doing, man? Or Greg, what's up?
Greg.
Hey, Colton.
What's good?
Not much. Look, I'll just get this in before I hand off the floor. I am about as frustrated as anybody here as far as the direction of the team. I've been a part of Will's church for a while, as far as Barkley and as far as Gettleman, as far as everybody else. I think the overwhelming frustration I've reached at this point is this is 70s bad. This is hopeless. It feels genuinely hopeless. I don't see any dawn on the horizon here.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. There seems to be no light at the end, and I'm going to probably say this numerous times, so you'll hear it throughout the night. But you bring up a great point, being in the same church as Will. Will was right. There has not been one thing
right.
he's been wrong about. Sorry.
Let's. I want to keep the focus on the Giants.
Of course. I'm just emphasizing that you guys might hear it tonight. So leave now.
But let's. I want to talk about going forward. I haven't been around since the 70s, but this is as hopeless as I've felt. And for those of you who don't know me, I've been somebody who for the last 3 years has very earnestly felt that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And that's part of why I've been in so much pain and why I've been basically so well known as being negative. But I want to be positive, and I think there are good things going on right now that I think we have to find, and that we want to be able to talk about. We got Weiss in here. I think want to hear what he has to say. I know he was solo this week on NYG Weekly, so I know we've heard 45 minutes of him if you've gotten on the episode yet. But Weiss, how you doing? I don't know if he's not able to speak right now because he's got some family going on. But let's see who else is trying to speak. Okay.
I could speak now. I let Greg speak because you introduced him.
Please, Colton. How you doing, man?
Just chilling. Got home from work. That's honestly the only break I get. But where I work, it's a bunch of Eagles fans. So
where's that? Is that Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that's where I live, and it's at the Blue Ridge Communication. Pretty much, like one of the anchors is a Eagles fan. I don't know if the other anchor even watches football. Pretty much everyone there, the general manager, all of them are Eagles fans. So I hear it. I hear it from them.
So what are you thinking, man? What do you want to talk about tonight?
I guess besides Tony, like what positive do you see? I mean, I like what I saw from Daniel Jones, even though he kind of did that to himself. I mean, maybe he didn't call a play, but like he lowered his head. But yeah, Kyle Rudolph definitely should have blocked that. That kind of annoyed me. But yeah, I mean, I'm down to talk about whatever. I guess I know you said you really didn't like the Saquon pick, so like I haven't followed you like since you said like that year, so I kind of want to hear a little more about that because I think he does have the potential, but the teams with the needs they have, like he just belongs somewhere else.
So I think
Not about the.
Yeah, I think we can get to the Saquon thing. If anybody else wants to address it real quick, I want to talk about the Giants going home because we had this great Twitter Spaces event 2 weeks ago, and I feel like we really got a lot of sentiment together. And we're coming back to the stadium in a couple of days, and I know a lot of people on here are going to be at the stadium, and I want to kind of try to get some people, on the same page about what we can look for, what we can talk about. Stas, how you doing, man? I know we got to meet each other pretty recently, but what are you thinking?
And if we're sticking to the positives, I think they're I don't feel like the cupboard is as empty as it used to be. I feel like we got some legit weapons now. I feel like we have our franchise left tackle. I mean, Thomas is putting the tape out there that proves that. I flip flopped from Danny Dimes. I wanted nothing to do with him the day he was drafted. I wanted nothing to do with him when he won his first game against the Bucks. But he slowly won me over. It started last year. Really, when he kind of hit that stretch where he was really playing good football, protecting the ball, and you started seeing glimpses like, okay, when you give this guy some time, he can really deliver. And then after the Saints game, it was the first time. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like we won a game that we dictated the terms on. Um, even the wins we had last year, I felt like we had the lead and we were just trying to survive. And the Saints game, I didn't feel that way. And when I look at even last week, after the initial anger of everything from last week, the game wasn't as lopsided in the time of possession as you think. I think we were off by like 6 minutes. Our defense completely, shit the bed on that
So,
one.
you're hitting a lot, and I just want to make sure that we can start addressing things without losing some of the good points you're making. If anybody wants to jump in, I don't want to take it all myself.
I was just gonna say that was the most entertaining loss I ever watched.
Last week, how about the Washington game?
All right, most entertaining double-digit loss by over 20 points. How about that?
Yeah, I can feel what you're saying. I mean, you had a little bit of everything. So, what do people feel about Joe Judge and handling Kadarius Toney? Do you think that he was too harsh? What do you want to see there?
I honestly don't mind any. I think you have to be as fair with this. He certainly well. You do need to show some bit of discipline as he does need to mature. But I think my larger question with Tony is why it took this long to realize this good.
Exactly.
I guess I don't know. With that one, we don't know what we don't know, right? Like all I knew is the kid had COVID, and when my brother had COVID, my brother's a real athletic guy. He was out for the count, man, and it took him a long time just to get his wind underneath him. And he's not an athlete, like a professional athlete. So I don't know. I'm trying to keep my hands off that because I don't know. If they start holding him out now I'm gonna have a problem. But before we don't know what we don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did they do anything besides just him like yelling like that was fucking dumb on the sideline? Like I didn't see much at work today. I just got
No,
home.
he's getting fined. He's not losing the game, and any other discipline is going to come from the Giants. And when they asked Joe about it yesterday, he said anything that happens is going to be kept in house. It looks like they're really giving the kid a pass because they were cheap shotting him the whole game.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean, also, how on earth can you watch that game and not let us start him every single snap for the rest of the year?
Right.
I won't lie, I may have made a drunk / high decision and bought his jersey. Like yesterday, I think.
Tony?
Yeah.
Well, fantastic.
I mean, even if he gets cut, traded, benched, I'll rep his jersey till I die. Like,
I don't know who looks much more promising than Kadarius Toney right now. Guys, we've got good news. About time Justin Pennick has finally joined us. Justin, how you doing today?
I was told wrong information that we would be starting at 8:15. I very much apologize for being late. I hope everybody's well. I'm glad we're doing this again. I'm glad to see that there's still a decent amount of people in here, and I'm ready to talk Giants because that's what we got to do. So, Will, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm ready to rock and roll.
I appreciate that. Without your charm, we didn't have quite the same charisma, if I could say so myself. But we've got a good crowd of speakers, and I just want to say I'm going to try to get to as many people speaking as possible. If you get a chance to speak and you've said what you have to say, if you can remove yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to be removing some people. Nothing personal, obviously. We're going to try to get back to everyone, but just trying to get as many faces in here as we can. Justin, we're talking about last week being kind of the most entertaining 20-point loss we've had in some time. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and obviously why it's entertaining is our friend Kadarius Toney, right? And a lot of what I've been thinking about, a lot of what I've been looking at is reflecting on some of the criticism that I gave the 2020 Giants offense and saying how the Giants 2020 personnel and the skill position players, they weren't really up to par, and that's why the offense was bad. When you looked at 2019, when it was basically the same exact thing, and Pat Shurmur had somewhat of success. But then you look at what Kadarius Toney has been able to do with the ball in his hands. That the last 2 weeks, where even the last 3 weeks, where he's averaged over 8 yards after the catch per reception the last 3 weeks. Nobody has done that during the Jason Garrett era at all, let alone 6 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards, nothing. So Kadarius Toney has done it 3 weeks in a row, not just on a 1 week basis. So seeing what he's able to do with the ball in his hands, it is a difference maker, and it frankly makes I guess some of the more excuses about the lack of personnel in 2020, it makes it a little bit more okay, and I give some more brownie points to that kind of narrative a little bit. So, but he's been really, really fun, and you feel good about kind of 3 pieces so far this year. You feel good about Toney, you feel good about Jones, and you're feeling good about Andrew Thomas. Probably Toney and Thomas more than Jones. So,
are you feeling as good about him after this week against the Rams, where he probably, if he's the healthiest receiver, he's going to get Jalen Ramsey?
Yeah, I mean, so now it's the big challenge for Kadarius Toney is okay now that he's circled on everybody else's radar. Now that teams know that this is a guy that can really produce with yards after the catch. This is a guy that can break tackles. This is a guy that can get a little bit of a slimmer of separation between the 1 to 9 yard range, and he can do something with the ball. So now it's the big challenge of, well, how can he do without a presence of Kenny Golladay and being basically the number one with Shepard and hopefully Slayton back? How is that going to go? And we shall see this Sunday.
This is also the worst type of receiver that Jalen Ramsey covers. Like, if we're being honest, he has trouble with that, with the wiry, quick twitch receivers. Those are the guys who give him problems.
True.
I kind of want to, hey guys, I just want to link back to, not to regress, but I mean, the COVID argument. I had COVID in January. I had no taste or smell, but I was fine. So, I mean, and I haven't seen any physical stuff. So I think that argument with Toney, I mean, while it is case-to-case basis, I think it's kind of invalid. But I do have a question, not to like steer the whole conversation, but I do think that Nate Solder is like the biggest liability, and I don't understand why I don't know if it's a team captain, kind of like a veteran presence, but I don't really understand why he's still on the field because every snap is just absolutely embarrassing.
Bro, he's teetering on Flowers level at this point. Like, it's embarrassing.
I mean, yeah, it's just bad.
I was gonna mention that too. I forget. I think Talking Giants shared something. I was gonna comment on that. The video of him getting spun around and like flopped on the ground. I was like, damn, that's Eric Flowers right there.
Well, no one can talk better about Justin, about Talking Giants than Justin, who also, as you may know, has shaved his head because he was so surprised that Nate Solder ended up starting this year. If you got a bunch of you guys I'll cycle through some people. If anybody's got their last things to say, if you've kind of joined in, please feel free to say it before I, move on.
Hey, just real quick, I just want to comment on Solder playing. I agree, but my only thing is like, who we're gonna put in his place. Like, if you want to give it to Pert, give it to Pert, but we can't cut that guy right now. It's not like the offensive line is decimated. Like, what are we gonna do? Like we get rid of him. Who's the rotational tackle?
I just don't see how it's worse than Solder at this point. Like, that was embarrassing Sunday. Even watched that game, like, towards before Jones got hurt, I started watching just strictly Solder, and it honestly, I think I could have blocked Gregory better than him. Like, anyone would be better at this point.
Okay.
Well, I think that's the point right there, too, because at this point in Soldier's career, overall, and with the Giants, we know exactly what he is. You guys mentioned Flowers. He's just as bad. At Matt Pert, why not find out what we have in a Matt Pert at right tackle when Andrew Thomas gets back healthy? It just makes – if he's as bad as Solder, I mean, I'm not okay with it, obviously, because it's going to get our quarterback killed even worse. But it's going to make me feel a lot less horrible than Nate Solder being out there, his little dead corpse that you're welcome pest. But I see no benefit in keep trotting out Nate Solder, and that's what's really starting to frustrate me about Joe Judge and his coaching staff is they seem way too stubborn to just keep him thrown out there. And if they keep saying that, oh, Pert's not ready, well, then maybe that's on you too. So I just don't see a benefit in keeping Solder out on the field when you should be seeing what you have in a late third-round pick.
Will,
Yeah.
Will, I have a question for you.
Yeah, and then I had a question for you.
Oh, great. Very quickly, Nate Solder is the worst Dave Gettleman free agent signing, correct? Like, that's not disputable.
yeah.
Jonathan Stewart's up there.
No, that's a great question. So so I consider Nate Solder the worst because Nate Solder is the most damaging free agent signing because it's the largest commitment of resources with $62 million originally in that contract, and I think it was $46 million that was guaranteed, and really only because of just how bad Nate Solder was that we were able to maneuver out of some of it by Solder being like, okay, like I can't go down as like the worst free agent ever, and I'll renegotiate this year, try to up some sort of ground on this contract. But my question for you, as we look at this Solder versus Pert question, the Giants are 1-4 right now. There's a chance that Daniel Jones is going to play this week, but if he plays, I think there's a lot of people who can make an argument that that's a real mistake. Are we worried right now about the 2021 Giants, or are we trying to worry about the long term, what's best for the Giants?
Well, are we, when we say we, are we saying fans, or are we talking about coaches?
Well, I mean, I feel like the people who are in this chat on a Wednesday night trying to talk about the Giants are the people who really care about the Giants. So what do you guys all have to say?
Yeah, I just don't see a world where Solder's on the team next year, and it's just like it honestly feels like the Judge is just being stubborn at this point, like not wanting to like admit he's wrong. And like you're saying about the Solder contract, like it's the worst free agent move by Gettleman by a mile, just to the fact that like it was never good. Like he was awful the day he walked in this door. Like there was not a single point in time where it was like, okay, he's a rock left tackle, he's above average. He's been god awful since he put on the jersey.
Hey, he was pretty good in the couple of preseason games in 2018. He was
Yeah,
pretty
he's
solid.
I think
PFF's highest graded player one preseason game, I think, where he played against some
Yeah,
Packers.
Will gets to remind somebody every year about that. So
I think the biggest point is does Nate Solder even have a spot, a practice squad or not on any other team? I mean, he's our starting left. I mean, with Andrew Thomas out, he's our starting left tackle. I mean, does he even have a bench spot on any other team at the moment?
Urban Meyer would take a wing on him.
So what I want to say about Solder, by the way, to be very clear, when we're talking about him being the worst signing ever, we're not saying that he's the worst football player that Gettleman brought in, and we're not saying that the 2018 Giants would have been better without Nate Solder than with Nate Solder, because obviously with Eric Flowers being the incumbent left tackle, Solder was an upgrade, especially in the second half of that year. When we're saying it's a bad free agent signing, is we're looking at the benefits that we just basically mentioned and comparing it to the costs of basically $62 million over a 4-year stretch, and we're saying that the benefits don't even come close to outweighing the costs.
Yeah, and by saying damages, like damaging, I find that word to be very, very powerful, and it's very, very true, because it's not just with the money, but it's now coming at the point where the Giants' blind love for Nate Solder is costing them probably another draft pick that will go down as a wasted draft pick in Matt Parrott with that 99th overall pick last year in 2020. Where if a new regime comes in, a new general managing regime comes in, and they're not going to have any kind of tape on Matt Parrott, any consistent tape on Matt Parrott that is, Matt Parrott's, he's played in some reps last year, obviously he played last week, but an NFL team hasn't really been given an opportunity to prepare for Matt Parrott on a game-in, game-out basis, where these edge rushers, these pass rushers, they're looking at tape, and it's like a dance. That's what Michael Strahan and John Runyon, that's what they've said all those years, where it's like a dance. Nobody has really gotten the opportunity to prepare properly for Matt Parrott. And if another regime comes in, and they're not going to be able to fully evaluate Matt Parrott with any kind of substantial game tape of him playing on a consistent basis, then that will be a guy that will be shipped out, and it will be a wasted third-round pick in a draft at which we did not have a proper third-round pick that is a compensatory pick because we traded for Leonard Williams. So that it all kind of just goes back and it spins on its head, and it's just a bad look.
I just wanted to touch base.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I want to let Don talk because I know he's been waiting for a minute.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to touch base on the first point about Saquon and the potential of Saquon, and I just wanted to touch base on my personal view of the team. I've been a Giants fan for a while. I've seen both Super Bowls. I've seen us when we had playoff years. As far as Saquon, I feel like his potential, it's not gone. I feel like because of us being 1-4 and just the status of the team, injuries, defense not playing well, I feel like a lot of people are losing a lot of faith as far as to where the team is going. My biggest issue with the team, I would say, it's from a schematic standpoint. And Jason Garrett, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I feel like the person that will get the most progression out of Jason Garrett will be Daniel Jones. From just watching the games and just seeing how the plays are called, the most progression comes from Daniel Jones, because out of everybody offensively, excluding Kadarius Toney, Daniel Jones is having the best year. And I feel like we're not aggressive. Like if you look at any other team, even teams that don't have
John, you're hitting a lot, so I want to address a little bit of that before we get onto too much. Anybody want to jump in? I know we got Vince in here, and I want to invite Vince. I'm excited to have Vince in here. We've disagreed on a lot over the years, but we've always really respected where each other's come from. And one of the great things about doing these spaces is to get viewpoints that don't necessarily all sound the same. So Vince, how you doing, man?
Hey, well, yeah, I know we've butted heads, but I go through a little. Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, we got you. And then so what do you think about anything we've been talking about with the line or with Garrett or anything we want to talk about the current team?
That's what about Solder a little bit more. When the signing happened, I disagree with you incredibly because I was content with it because that year it was just an awful year for free agent left tackles, and he just happened to be technically the number one free agent left tackle that year, and of course they overspent by a mile, which I hated. But I didn't expect him to be this bad. Did anybody?
I did.
I expected at least solid, at least almost as good as what he was in the Patriots, which wasn't great, but at the very least solid, stable. He's been unbelievably awful. Mm-hmm. What happened?
New England re-signs anybody. If they didn't re-sign him or made an attempt to bring him back, he must have been worse than what he was.
So New England did make a pretty
aggressive
attempt to bring him back, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to jump in and attack that. As somebody who's been as bearish as anybody. I when a lot of people celebrated the Soldier signing, I quote tweeted for the first time that day, "Fire Gettleman," and obviously I was kidding a little bit at the time, but in hindsight, I think that it was just one of the many red flags that this guy was in way over his head. What happened with Nate Solder was Dave Gettleman treated the 2018 free agency period, like he was a father going to get his kids a Christmas gift. And he decided that his son wanted Andrew Norwell as the best possible lineman available. And he says, okay, I'm going to go try to get Andrew Norwell. And Andrew Norwell says, to hell with you. I want to go play for Jacksonville. And he says, okay, fine. Well, I still have to make my son happy. I'm going to get the next best thing available, no matter how much it costs. The whole process involved with signing Nate Solder was terribly backwards. It was basically trying to give, trying to give a one-day victory for a 2+ year problem. Did anybody think that Solder would be as bad as he was? Probably not. But there's another important lesson that I want to talk about with the Nate Solder signing. The year before, 2017, and a lot of people learned from 2017 from the offseason. Their big takeaway was, if only we got Andrew Whitworth instead of Brandon Marshall, I think things would have really, we would have had something to work with there, because Andrew Whitworth went to the Rams, had a Pro Bowl year, and really helped anchor their line and carry them to the Super Bowl. But I don't think that's what would have happened. I think if we signed Andrew Whitworth, people would talk about Andrew Whitworth being a terrible tackle. We wouldn't have been that much better. He'd probably be out of the league right now. And
his age.
And I just think that the system with Hal Hunter blocking for Eli Manning, and now at this point it's 2 years later, and I think that Solder is just not the athlete that he was after 2 years, after a full year out of football. It's been a very difficult time. I saw a stat the other day. The Giants have drafted more spent more first and second round picks on offensive linemen since 2013 than any other team in football.
It's insane. I've argued people saying the Giants have neglected the O-line, and I hate to defend Reese, but he did not neglect the O-line. He just sucked at picking new guys, whether it was Flowers, Richburg, Pugh, who name it, and picking up signing Jeff Schwartz, among other guys, and all the guys in between, the McCants, the Mosleys, the Chase Brewers, all of them just busted one after the other. And Flowers, of course, trying to make him left tackle when he clearly wasn't left tackle. just massive waste after waste, and you're still trying to work on the O-line, and it's just beyond embarrassing.
And sorry, go ahead. I see Mitchell keep looking to speak, and then I'm gonna continue to rotate some people. So I want to, like, if you've been here for a while, you get your last couple cents in.
This sucks. Thanks, Will.
I'll say something quick because then I gotta go. I gotta study for a midterm. So yeah, I messaged you about it. But so, did Nate Solder take the pay cut because he was bad, or was it because he took a year off for COVID?
Both.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was the Giants had 2 linemen going into this offseason that were veterans that they wouldn't be able to keep at their current contracts, Zeitler and Solder. A lot of people thought that we would basically be able to move on from both, which I think would have made sense in some ways. But what Solder did instead was he said, okay, instead of saving the $10 million or exactly whatever it would have been by cutting me, I'll play for $10 million less and ride it out. But that way I can, do my best to earn this very generous signing that came in originally.
Okay, I got you. All right, thanks for that explanation. And thanks for letting me speak. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of this episode. Always a pleasure to listen.
Good luck, man. Good luck with the midterm.
Good luck on your midterm.
Colton's the man. Colton's the man. He helps out with some Talking Giants stats and stuff like that. And anytime I tweet out the first down rates, the pass rates, and the run rates, and the first down productivity on Sunday, Colton's gathering that data, so he's the man.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate him being able to join. I know we got some guys who've recently joined in. FC, Brent, you guys got anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, man. Real quick.
You got it,
go
FC.
ahead.
You got it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, real quick. You guys kind of hit on it with like the offensive line. I can't tell you how frustrating it is, man. Like Gettleman, the last years, all I hear is hog mollies. This line is pathetic, man. Like I know we got some injuries, but can't stop a freaking lick, man. It's getting out of hand. And on top of that, one more point I want to bring up with you guys, get your insight or get your input, I guess, is this team is a little concerning with the coaching staff, right? What I mean by that is the team has no fight. For example, Daniel Jones gets knocked out of the game, gets lit up. Only guy running over is Kadarius Toney. How is he the only guy going to check up on the star quarterback? Makes no sense. What do you guys see from that point of view?
Man, I keep trying to talk about like what's going on right now and not talk about like let's talk about Dave Gettleman rant, but it's getting harder and harder with some of the things that are being asked. Anybody else want to chime in for this?
I would say to FC's point, I don't think it's necessarily, I do think the team has fight. I just think we're gonna see small shades of it. I just feel like Kadarius Toney, he knew he had the biggest chip on his shoulder because he was having the biggest game. So I feel like that's what kind of made him go over there and kind of just wish him well as Daniel Jones was leaving the game.
So I don't want to say that I don't think the team has heart. And I think different people on the team have heart in different ways. But I want to talk about actually, Nicky Snacks earlier said that I've been right about everything. One thing that I think he'll be quick to disagree with himself on about that is my respect and my decision to continue to root for and support Evan Ingram. And I think
completely wrong.
Okay, my bad. Okay, appreciate you. But I think Evan Ingram's, one of the first guy. He was the first guy when Toney was getting licked up, who had Toney's back and started shoving people around to protect him. Whether or not whatever happened or didn't happen with the punch or whatever, who knows? But Evan Ingram is a guy who he sweats for his giant blue. He does the not sexy things even if he's not very good at it, and his coaches love it. So when we talk about does this team have fight? Evan Ingram is one of the reasons that I think the team does, and I want to give him that respect for that.
There's never been a question or never been a doubt that he works hard, and frankly, there's not a guy on the team that I feel like you feel more bad for. And I get it, a lot of fans, you just look at the results and it's not good, but I would rather have all of the bad, misfortunate things that Evan Ingram has kind of gone through the last 2 years, even though he's been healthy, by the way. He's been relatively healthy. I would rather that happen to a bad guy who has bad character rather than a guy like Evan Ingram who seems like he's a good guy and he tries his hardest. He's working his ass off and coaches love him and stuff like that. So just another example of misfortune with this franchise. So
a lot of it has been just misfortune. I will say this: I'm not a big fan of Judge. I'm still very, very much on the fence of him from day one. but I'll say this about him: the team itself as a whole doesn't seem to give up no matter what the situation is under him, and it's the only thing I'll give him credit on thus far.
No, I think that's a really fair point. And I like what Justin's saying about Evan Ingram's a guy who really does things the right way. I mean, even after he dropped that pass in Philadelphia that drove everyone so crazy, Evan Ingram was the guy who faced the media and was accountable for it. And I think that you get a lot of respect for that. You compare that to a guy like Eli Apple who didn't care, who made fun of the
Yeah.
media, who asked him questions about that. Evan Ingram's a guy that I'm proud to support as a Giant, and I really hope fans think twice before doing stuff like booing him when he gets subbed out this Sunday.
Yeah, we all
Well,
moments have rubbed us the wrong way, but yeah, he does give it his all. It's just that when you fail in clutch moments like that, yes, you can take the heat and everything else, but man, is that backbreaking, especially when how critical those moments are. That's you understand that.
There's no doubt about that, and the point that I want to reemphasize, if you've had this conversation with me, you've heard me make this point before. But Bill James, who was a member of the Red Sox, who is really credited as being a forefather of baseball analytics, said that bad teams blame their best players for losing. And I mean, you really saw that with the Giants with Odell, and I think you see that with Evan Ingram. I mean, that play in Philly, obviously, where we say Giants would have won if he held onto the ball. He was the only guy who got open. He was the guy that Danny threw it to because he was open, because none of the other guys were open. So I feel like be careful before you say get rid of him for a 6th-round pick, because defenses actually think about him.
Well, it's always easy to focus on one single play. At the end of the game, you always focus on that one play at the end of the game instead of the entirety of a game where one play here, one play there, one play there. I mean, we all go back to our biggest nightmare back to 2 or 3 the bad snap play. Plays before that snap that ruins anything there. So yeah, Ingram's a good player. He has some bad and I do agree with that.
Sorry, Vince, we had a little bit of static, I think, with the last part that you were saying, but I think your point about it's more than one player that wins football games is a great point.
Ingram's not a bad player. I agree with you. Ingram's a good player. He fights for it, but he's had just some bad moments.
But I feel like that also kind of piggybacks off of the scheme as well. I just don't think, and I hate to go back on this, but I feel like it's important because we have all the weapons. Daniel Jones has all the weapons, and it's just not aggressive. I feel like our most aggressive game besides Washington was the Saints. And, there's kind of like a divide between the games. So is it like, are we going to see an aggressive team every 2 games, every 3 games? Like, we have to be more aggressive, and we have to have trust in the scheme. I feel like not only as an offense, but as fans and as players as well, because we have too much dynamite to not blow up every week.
And the defense is not good enough to play conservatively. I actually agree with you 100%. They have to be more aggressive. They can't get by on – the ball just doesn't bounce their way. They cannot get by on playing conservatively and hoping things fall into place. I agree with 100% there.
You can't win. You can't win in the present NFL without pass rush. And how many sacks do we have on this year? It's
But I feel like
horrific.
the defense last year, as far as our defense, when we didn't have as many key pieces as we do this year, we had more role players, and that's what is unique about Pat Graham, because he, what's unique about Joe Judge is they speak versatility. So last year we had to depend more on the versatility of backup guys like Darnay Holmes or Jabril Peppers, guys who aren't playing as well this year because we have additional pieces regarding to last year where we had less and we got more from the defense. So I just feel like personally that's the biggest thing. Now that we have more to see with Dory Jackson and Danny Shelton and Leonard Williams, he's not really having as big as a breakout year. But I feel like because we have more, it kind of makes the scheme a little bit less disciplined, rather than when you have guys that are coming in and they've got a lot more to prove and they're developing with the scheme. And we're getting more turnovers, because when you go from a top 10 defense to a bottom 30 defense, that's obviously a problem.
Well, these guys aren't developing. Lorenzo Carter, Yoshing Zimenez, I don't know where they've been other than just filling up space. And they were supposed to be the big guys. These are Gettleman's boys, and we were all supposed to be high on them. They flashed early as rookies and everything, but they've done basically a whole lot of nothing since. So disheartening stuff all around there.
Yeah, and go ahead, Don.
If I could, Will or Justin, just a question, and I just wanted to see you guys' insight. because I know, us as Giants fans, we have different views on different players. But during the Dave Gettleman era, and this is not to go into a rant with Dave Gettleman, but during his era and from what he's drafted for us, who do you guys think are the best picks he's drafted within the last? I'm not sure how long he's been here, 5 years, but within the time frame since he's gotten here, who are the most promising picks that you guys think he made?
All right, I'll jump in because I guess you said Will or Justin, but we're talking about Gettleman's top picks.
Yeah,
So I was focused on a little bit of housekeeping, trying to rotate some new speakers in. But
anybody can answer. I was just
no,
curious. This is a question for anyone.
For sure. I think right now, the pick that obviously is most exciting for the franchise is Daniel Jones, and I was not a Daniel Jones fan. I was not a fan of the pick, and I was not a fan of the value. But I think Jones has shown a lot that can really show that he can be a long-term franchise QB. And the point that I've made before that I think people kind of forget about because of how we look for instant gratification today. But Jones is further ahead in year 3 than Eli was at this time, and Eli had obviously a much better team, and he was stacking wins a little better. But Jones can do more things, I think, with his hands, with his arm, with his legs, and with his mind than Eli was able to do in year 3. So I think that looks really exciting. I don't necessarily give Gettleman a pass for getting Daniel Jones because I think that had anything that he said was going to happen in 2018 worked out, we wouldn't have been picking high enough to end up with Daniel Jones. So I think you've got to keep that in mind in evaluating him. But I know we've got some new voices in here wanting to hear what other people have to say, including a Giants Twitter comedy legend right now, El Jefe.
What's up, fellas? Thanks, Will, for putting this together and having us on. I am in the car, so if my audio sucks, just let me know.
Are you wearing the Eli jersey or the 26 jersey right now?
Neither one. I'm headed to a game right now, so I leave them at home. The different personas. And by the way, I'm not either one of those guys. It's just funny because that's just the stuff I see on Twitter all the time. So it's too good to not do something with it. But you touched on Daniel Jones as a great pick for Gettleman. Basically, only recently do I think everybody kind of got on board with that because he showed promise, and I think he always just represented potential, and then he's finally putting it together this year. I was firmly on the fence with Daniel Jones until this season, and I think he's shown enough that everyone should feel that you can win with Daniel Jones. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy. He's missed time every season, which makes what Eli did for 16 years that much more ridiculous in that position to never miss a game with injury. But I think Andrew Thomas is showing up as, it was scrutinized a lot last year as, we got the worst tackle in the draft, some people were saying, and he's turning out to be a rock. And he's also another guy who turned the right corner and is looking great this year. So that looks like another great one from him. And I'll leave it up to you guys, whatever else anybody wants to add. Thanks, Will.
Drive safely. And if anybody, is learning to drive here, he's been driving a long, long time, and I'm sure is on hands-free.
I actually have some breaking news. It's very irrelevant breaking news, but Will, we're very fond of John Halapio, correct?
I have always been a Halapio fan.
So it was known a little bit earlier today, but Bobby Skinner just broke the news, and I might have informed him that this was going to happen. But the 49ers are signing John Halapio, so just congratulations to John Halapio. You're getting back in the NFL. He certainly deserves it. Great guy, great hard worker. We're talking about good draft picks, huh? Is that what we're reviewing right now?
Hold on a second. I want to say a congratulations to John, who actually I saw in this chat earlier, and I don't know if we've still got him, but
I think John, he is in here.
He's a fantastic Giant story, and if fans are listening here, I encourage you to Google how this guy was able to start his NFL, keep his NFL career. He's bounced around from practice squad to practice squad, was out of the league and selling cars for a long time. He's gone through some brutal injuries and fighting around with the Giants. He's basically been a guy who's filled in anywhere on the line where he was asked to do. He's one of the guys, like I was talking about with Evan, who did everything the right way. He was with the Giants on the practice squad in 2016, so he was here actually as one of the few guys who'd actually seen some good times. And I think that a lot of the young guys with the team today, we're lucky to have played with him right now. So the fact that he's getting another shot with San Francisco, fantastic. Couldn't be more happy for him.
It's going to be a fun team too. Obviously being in that competitive NFC West, and go out and go play the Seattle Seahawks, where they're not looking too good on defensively. So I'm very happy for John Halapio.
Fantastic. And then we were talking about other great good draft picks, and I think we can spend some time talking about the bad picks in a little bit. But I want to
I have
also
one
talk
more
about.
to chime in for a good draft pick. Sorry to interrupt you, Will, but I think and this is obviously I'm being cautiously optimistic here, but I think the good draft pick is obviously having the second first next year. I don't think he'll still be the general manager at that point to make the selection, and I'm hopeful that he won't be, because I agree with a lot of the viewpoints that you've shared, Will. I'm not the biggest Gettleman fan, and I do not want him to be the general manager entering next year, but the fact that the Giants have a second first round pick, if for some reason Daniel Jones regresses and does not look like he can be a franchise quarterback, they have 2 first round picks for that option. I believe in Daniel Jones, but at the same time, I do not think the Bears are going to be able to sustain that success. I just don't trust Matt Nagy at all. I think that Bears pick is going to end up in the top 12 or 15, and it looks like that's where the Giants pick is going to be also. So if we're going to say positive things about Dave Gettleman, I will say that I think that Bears pick next year will ultimately be a top 15 pick, which will be really important for the Giants, who need so much help right now.
Yeah, if you followed me at all, I've been preaching, about trading down really for the last 7 years. So I'm thrilled that it actually happened this year. But I just want to quickly talk about a guy who doesn't really get talked about a lot. Just got designated to return from IR, but it's Cam Brown. A lot of guys, who know me tease me for being a little fixated on the special teams. But Cam Brown has been a freak as a gunner. He's got real long arms, which Judge, who knows a lot more about special teams than I do, really seems to like. And I think Cam Brown could be one of those guys who's around in the locker room for up to like a decade. And the Giants really need that. We're talking about what's wrong, and I think it's a really long conversation. But when I grew up and I started going to games in '95, there was so much history. Even it was at the end of Phil Simms and the end of LT and the end of Carl Banks and a lot of the legends who my father grew up rooting for. But you still had guys in the locker room like Howard Cross and the beginning of the careers like Michael Strahan, and guys who people could look at and say, this is a guy who's still playing at a high level, and a guy who who knows what it means to be a Giant. So I hope I have really high expectations for Cam Brown, and I hope maybe he can fill in on the edge, because we haven't seen anything so far.
Yeah, I'm not hopeful. I'm not hopeful at the edge. You're obviously hopeful about special teams production, and that certainly has its value. And to be a 6th round pick in a in a draft where you had 10 picks in the 2020 draft, the edge room is just a whole nother conversation on one of the reasons why Dave Gettleman deserves a lot of criticism for a guy in his introductory press conference to say that we're going to get after quarterback, we're going to pressure the quarterback, to have all these years of general manager, to have really the only significant investment in the edge room is a 2nd round draft pick that you only picked this year. It's kind of brutal. It's a brutal look, and it's unfortunately making a lot of other players on this team bad, like Leonard Williams and like Dexter Lawrence, where yes, their play has been extremely underwhelming this year, and it has not matched previous years, but I think it's the problems with this defense starts with the lack of edge production, where Jabal Sheard and Trent Harris, you can argue, gave better production and better efforts than the guys that are here this year right now. So that's my 2 cents on that edge room. Oof! I can't wait for Thibodeau, Kayvon Thibodeau, to be the best draft pick the Giants have had since 2018. So
And
I'm really excited for that.
He'll be the 2nd best Thibodeau in New York. So
that is true. That is. Oh, snacks! I know you can't wait to run with that. Little narrative.
It would actually be my favorite thing in the world if the Giants did get him, and him and Coach Tibbs. But anyway, I just want to talk real quick about the draft picks. I had to cut out for a second because I got a phone call, but I couldn't stop thinking when Will was talking about Cam Brown, and he was a 6th round pick, right?
Yes.
6th, one of the 7. Okay, so he's a 6th round pick, and we're talking about a general manager's good picks being a 6th round special teamer in 3 full drafts. I know he had the 4th one this year, but it's way too early to tell on anybody, even if Tony looks like the second coming of Jesus Christ. But
I don't want to cut you off right now, but we had two.
Well, you just did.
2 picks mentioned. We had 2 picks mentioned that were first rounders right before. Then that might have been when you were disconnected on the phone.
2 first round pick. Which ones? I'm sorry.
We talked about Daniel Jones and Andrew Jones.
No. I know. But those are the obvious ones. The fact that we have no 2nd or 3rd round picks or 4th round picks, spots where you're supposed to get good quality depth players to fill out your roster, none of them have hit. You got 3 full drafts to really kind of see of what you got, and we're talking about a 6th round special teamer as being a positive sign. Which, yes, it's great, and you need those guys. But if that's not an indictment, then I don't know what is. So I got to take this call back again. So just go ahead, light me up. I don't give a shit.
What a bad guy! You are such a bad guy. Hernandez is really the only guy from the 2018 draft class that deserves any kind of conversation as to a contract extension right now. So
And that conversation probably won't go on too long either. So
Yeah.
it's very problematic.
And I will say for what it's worth that I thought B.J. Hill was a very solid pick.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, there you go. That's a good point. B.J. Hill was a solid ball player for us, and he's balling out in Cincinnati right now. And he's not on the team, so
which I think which as we've discussed is for a plethora of other factors. And when we talk about criticizing Dave Gettleman or the front office in general for not going after the offensive line very specifically this offseason, you've got to remember that there were holes all over the place that also had to be replenished twice over. And still we didn't get around to doing anything about the edge position, which as we've discussed on this app before, 2.5 years ago he said, "Oh, Rome wasn't built in a day." Actually, he said that in 2018 too. But I know we got some new speakers. Isaiah, how you doing, man? Jimmy, what's up? Monty, talk to me. Bueller.
Hey, this is Doc. I'll throw something out there.
Murdered them all. What's up, Doc?
Hey, I'll throw something out there because it's kind of in line with what you guys are talking about. I mean, I was going to ask about so you've got Leonard Williams getting double and triple teamed on plays because obviously he's the biggest threat on the line in the eyes of a lot of the opposing offenses. But that should be like a huge opportunity for the other guys that are working the edge or working the middle of the defense, and it's not happening. And I think that's one of my biggest frustrations is if you've got that much attention going to Leonard Williams and maybe not quite as much, but still a healthy amount of attention going to Dexter Lawrence, what's happening on the edge? How are these guys not winning? It's not like they're fighting double tight end sets every time we line up on the ball. So what exactly is happening with the defensive line? I don't want to say it's got to do with scheme. I think that's more impacting the secondary than it is the line, but I can't for the life of me make sense of why no one's penetrating that line.
Well, here's where it impacts the scheme. Patrick Graham is running a lot more with two high safeties this year, and this has been confirmed by some player tracking data that some people with access to data that I don't have that they've they put out those graphs. And Patrick Graham's been running like that too high scheme that Fangio likes to run with the Broncos and Brandon Staley likes to run with the Chargers. Yep. So when you're running too high, and as last year, Giants ran a lot of that single high safety, cover, maybe rotating cover 3 after the snap. I don't know a lot about, just schematic stuff, but I know about, I can simply look at a chart and I can tell you what they're doing. Where they had that additional guy in the box last year, where Jabril Peppers, part of the reason why his snap share was really high last year is because he would be that guy in the box and he would be running around all over the field and he was that chess piece, and it made this Patrick Graham defense a lot more versatile where they were playmakers. And I think, Peppers allowed a lot of other guys to do a little bit more. And obviously when James Bradbury's not playing at a top 5 cornerback level, that hurts too. I mean, there's a lot of things right now. There is no one thing that you can point to on this Giants defense, in my opinion. I think it starts in the edge room, but really there's no one thing that you can point to on this Giants defense right now saying, aha, that's the reason why these things are bad. But Graham is kind of running this too high system a little bit more, taking that guy out of the box, and I think it's impacting the pass rush, where Peppers would be a phenomenal blitzer. Blitzer. There were 6 pass rush snaps that opportunities that Peppers had against the Falcons. He had 2 QB hits. Those 2 QB hits are still some of the best on the team, and we've had 5 games that we played so far this year. So there are certain things, little different things that the Giants defense is doing, compared to what they were doing last year. Statistically, they're kind of similar in a lot of categories. They're still giving up a lot of yards. They're still giving up time of possession per drive. They're still giving up They're obviously giving up points at an above average rate. The completion rate, yes, the big talking point is that the Giants defense has allowed 74% completion rate this year, but still last year they allowed 68%, which was still top 10 in the National Football League. So it's similar in some ways, but there are little things that are different. And I also think it comes down to player execution, where yes, Graham is doing some things different, but the lack of player execution, where there's interceptions that are in guys' hands, there are sacks to be made, there are tackles to be made at the line of scrimmage, and these guys just aren't doing it. So it's a little bit on Graham, but I would still mostly side with the players, where those players just aren't making plays the same way that they were last year.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Justin, because it's been probably the most frustrating thing for me. I mean, besides watching someone like Bradbury struggle after such a great year, I mean, that's obviously frustrating. I just think it's kind of wild to me that I thought this year they were going to be great, but they'd be functional enough to put enough pressure on the passing game that we wouldn't be solely reliant on the secondary to kind of keep offenses in check, and it's not happening. Even if, I mean, there's plenty of other teams out there that don't seem to be dropping people to the line and they're running 2 high safeties, and there's still somewhat of a pressure on the quarterback. I just don't feel like we're getting that at all. Maybe it's just me. I'm just not seeing it. But
Well, no, I mean they're 30th in pressure rate. They're they're bad. They're just flat out bad. They're last in the league in QB hits. At least last year, or even just sometimes in general in football. If the team isn't getting the sacks, you can point to the pressures, you can point to the QB hits, and saying, oh, they're still producing somewhat of a pass rush. But no, there's not even that this year. I can't even point to, and all the things that I look at on Pro Football Reference and blah blah blah. There's not even all that I can point to say, you know what, this Giants defense is better than we think. No, it's just flat out bad right now. It's flat out bad.
And then just one more thing, and then I'll shut up. So Don brought something up earlier about Daniel Jones bringing out the potential in Jason Garrett as an offensive coordinator. And I think that I'm not going to disagree with him. I think he's right, but that's the wrong way to approach that relationship, right? We should be looking at Jason Garrett to bring the best out of the offense. And it's obviously not a good fit. I'm not like a burn Jason Garrett to the ground guy, but I am frustrated that we're looking at players having to pull the best out of the coaching staff's potential. That just seems completely backwards to me, and that's not a hit on Don. It's just a hit on the situation, right? It's like we're actually in that situation. That's a bit frustrating. So thanks for letting me talk, guys.
I'm actually glad you circled back to this, because that's kind of when I tried to chime in. And I've been critical of Garrett, particularly this year, but I think we started to see things starting to turn. And even in the Dallas game, if you were able to rewatch it, or if you were lucky enough to have like the coach's film, you could still see that he was still trying to do some of the things that we saw in the New Orleans game and some of the things in the Washington game. So I think that was starting to turn. But as soon as Andrew Thomas goes out, everything changes. It is so hard to run your offense with Nate Solder at left tackle that we have to get Andrew Thomas back, and we have to get him back healthy. And particularly not just for the system to be run, but for Daniel Jones' continued progress and improvement. And I think we have to give Garrett a little credit when it comes to developing quarterbacks. He has a track record of doing a very good job developing quarterbacks, and I'm still doubtful in him. And Justin, I think you could probably speak to it better than I can, but I think we were starting to see the offense turn.
Yeah,
Mike, go ahead, Will.
No, I'm glad that Mike said a lot, and I'm sorry, Doc, I wasn't able to answer a lot of that. My phone cut out on me, but I think what Mike's saying needs to be considered, that Garrett does have a record developing QBs, and he has a decent record of developing Jones so far. As our friend Dave Gettleman likes to point to, his resume there does look somewhat okay. And I think I'll segue to Justin to talk about we did look a little better in New Orleans, especially once we had the scoreboard pressure that really gave us no choice but to do that.
Yeah, it's funny how Garrett has developed quarterbacks despite the scheme. It's almost like if you can perfect the Jason Garrett offense challenge, then that's how you know you're somewhat of a good quarterback, right? So it's almost like he like develops these guys in spite of his own kind of what he's supposed to be good at, and that's his system. And I think that's where the continuity comes in, Mike. I love the point that you made. It was bound to get better. The offense was bound to get better, but we still shouldn't act like this offense is fixed. And I know nobody is claiming that, but second year in the system where the Giants are moving the ball in terms of their yards per drive and their time of possession per drive, they're moving the ball actually like a top 10, top 5 offense. I don't know if at least after the New Orleans game, it may look a little bit differently because of the Dallas game, Jones getting hurt and the pressure rate, not having Andrew Thomas, et cetera, et cetera. But the Giants were moving the ball like a top 10 offense, but they still were scoring points like a bottom quarter offense. And that is the issue, where it's the game script and it's staying on schedule. The game script basically in the red zone that has hurt this team, where they'll have the 10, 11, 12 play drives, but then once they get to the red zone, they basically stall out, and you're looking at settling for field goals. You miss some field goals when you cross the 50, and that's basically almost been the difference between winning and losing, that you can't put 7 points on the board. So I like the offense. Garrett does deserve more credit, but at the same time, this is still a team that cannot score 7 points on a consistent basis, and that's still my biggest issue with Jason Garrett. And Mike, whole thing about Andrew Thomas, that's why Andrew Thomas and left tackle is the second most valuable position in the game of football. Andrew Thomas has showed it this year, where left tackle, that having good left tackle play has helped the quarterback kind of like more than anything. And that's the first time we've had good left tackle play in a very long time.
Jacob, Johnny, I see you guys have your hands
So,
up. Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, I want to let these guys get a chance to get a couple words, and then Carl, please take it over.
I was going to say, going back to just quickly about the lack of pressure point that was brought up, and I know Justin spoke extensively about. I think the two biggest things for me, I think the first part of it that attributes to the struggle so much is just the sheer inability to stop the run. I think that plays directly into the inability to rush the passer. I mean, I know a lot of you guys have talked about it, how you have guys like Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence who are paid big money to be there in the middle and stuff the run, and they've consistently shown an inability to do that. And I think the other thing with the pass rush is also when the Giants have those limited opportunities and they actually get to the quarterback, they're not executing. I mean, the two plays or the one play that stands out is, I think it was like a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, and Julian Love sneaks in on a corner blitz from the nickel, and Dak doesn't see him, and he has Dak wrapped up around the ankle, can't bring him to the ground, so Dak is able to throw it out of bounds, and instead of it being like a 3rd and 15, it's still a 3rd and 6, and the Cowboys were easily able to convert on 3rd down. So I think that just those two things are really frustrating, and I don't think the Giants are going to be able to develop a more consistent pass rush until they're able to stop the run first, which was supposed to be an area of strength for this team, and it's turned into a weakness.
Yeah, so I want to get I want to let a bunch of other guys who are waiting to talk say a few things, and I have a lot I want to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Big fan of yours, Justin. So going off of your point, kind of when Justin specifically, you were discussing how this offense usually moves the ball down the field, and we're top 10 in the league, and actually, moving the ball and then yards per drive, we finish things off. That's my kind of. I'm always a big Judge defender. I've been a big Judge defender since he's been hired as head coach because he preaches the right message and he seems like the guy who's going to turn around after having Shermer and McAdoo, but this is not the offense where you're going to be able to have the ability to punt on 4th and 1. And you see these teams, they might not have the best offenses, but they are aggressive on those short yardage situations where it allows them to continue drives where, points are of the essence. And a lot of times they're not 7 for 3s. I just can't fathom the fact that we keep doing the same thing over and over, because those specific times where we're going to punt on the 40-yard line on a 4th and 1, where in 2 plays later they get back to our 40-yard line, those are some things that, because of how inefficient this team is in the red zone, it's not something that we're going to be able to keep doing if we're going to try to finish off the drives.
What I'm hearing from you is like an unspoken frustration that I feel personally is like, when we punt, and give the other team the ball and we take 40 yards of field position, they can pick it up really quickly. But why can't we do that when they punt it back to us? Or when,
Right.
As somebody else was just saying, when we have Dak like wrapping the ankles and he can still get a first down of it, why doesn't that necessarily, happen for us when we're on offense? So, I think there's a here, and I think, a point that is being kind of danced around and that we're all kind of making ourselves is that this shouldn't be a case where like a couple pieces, like, an Andrew Thomas gets down and the offense is dysfunctional. And I understand that, we're still, a lot of guys are very new into the system, but it's concerning that it feels like the depth isn't there. And obviously, with all the roster turnover at the line specifically, that's going to come, but we're not ready to be competitive in a year where the money is all in to be winning now.
Yeah, absolutely. And on those short yardage situations, you would think that the running back that we took 2nd overall and the assets that we've allocated towards this offensive line, you'll be able to get a yard, along with a quarterback who on any zone read, he can keep the ball and he's going to get that first down. Obviously, the play on the goal line was something where he got hurt, but, I think the blocking didn't seem to be right there. And then another point that I wanted to make is it seems like all of the 2nd to 4th round rookies that get them in drafts, it looks like they do show flashes in their their rookie years, like your Darnay Holmes, Xavier McKinney towards the end of the year last year, and then it looks like in year 2, for whatever reason, it seems like they drop off. Lorenzo Carter, I love Lorenzo Carter. I loved him pre-draft. I wanted him to be the next Giants edge, and it's just really frustrating to see that the guys in the middle rounds, where the best rosters in the NFL are built, they're not developing into the players that we need them to be. And it seems like they always take the step back. And I just want to know if anyone agrees with me or anyone has any idea why, because it seems like they flash and then they fall behind where we need to try to fix those in free agency. And we need to fill in those gaps, which causes more problems with the cap.
No, you're hitting on a lot, Johnny. Appreciate that. Anybody want to take this before I start maybe ranting?
I think there's a little. I think coming into this year, there was a little too much expectation on Lorenzo Carter. He's playing, so obviously, he's out there, so he needs to produce. But the idea that he was going to come back the first year after a ruptured Achilles tendon and be dynamic off the edge, I think that was a little ambitious. I mean, just you can look to Marcus Golden as an example. That it took him a full year of playing to get back to the kind of production and the kind of impact that he had prior to the injury than after. And unfortunately, this is a contract year for Lorenzo Carter.
One QB hit. I
Can
mean,
I say
that's
something real quick?
yeah. Go ahead.
Please, that's why you're here.
All right. So my question is, because there's no really correct answer, and no one knows. But a huge issue is firing a GM and keeping the head coach. And I'm not saying I don't like Joe Judge, but I don't like firing Gettleman.
So,
I think Gettleman's so gone.
Matt, I promise you we're going to get into the firing Gettleman conversation. I don't want to cut you off right there, but I want to stay on this talking about some of the stuff we're talking about right now. But we're definitely going to get there. And I want to kind of save that conversation because I don't think we're going to be able to get off of it once we start it.
Got it.
So the only thing that I went to hop on and I think we got sidetracked or whatever, but it was like, we were talking about, Jason Garrett and his, relationship with Daniel Jones and how players are new to the system and all that. Jason Garrett, obviously the play calling is fucking yikes. The one thing that Dan Duggan brought up, the writer for The Athletic, that was really interesting is if this Daniel Jones is the long-term plan, the first year of this new system is cut out the turnovers, and then the next year is just, now we can let you go and ball out, then that's really interesting. And I think a really good way to develop a young quarterback. But yeah, in terms of play calling, it's Jason Garrett's not the best.
I agree with that. And I just want to make sure we address the question though that was just being asked of are we what's happening with guys who flash their rookie year and then disappear. And I'll just give my 2 cents before anybody else wants to chime in. I think a lot of we'd see that is obviously we switch schemes and we switch coaches. So we saw a coaching staff that really liked what Ryan Connolly was bringing to the table, for example, and then we decided that Ryan Connolly didn't even fit the system as in a reserve role, and that's okay because some coaches look for to prioritize strengths in players that other coaches don't want. We just brought up Marcus Golden, for example. Marcus Golden is a better pure pass rusher than a lot of the guys that the Giants have. Patrick Graham
than any of them on this football team right now.
Maybe not Ojulari, but
no, I think he is. No, Ojulari's a rookie.
Okay, in terms of getting the quarterback, I'm not going to argue with that. But Patrick Graham wants an edge who can also drop into coverage, and Marcus Golden is not a guy who wants to do that. So that fit doesn't work. So when we see guys like B.J. Hill, who probably would still be a part of, and there are a couple parts of the B.J. Hill conversation too, but you got to keep in mind that a lot of what stopped looking so promising in 2019 was because of a brand new coaching system. The Darnay Holmes thing I think is a little different, very specifically because just like Isaac Yiadom, I think he was at the bottom of a cornerback depth chart that the team still didn't have right. Anybody else want to talk about this before we start moving on? Because I do think the Gettleman question is kind of looming over this conversation, and as you might be able to guess, I have a few thoughts on that one. Take it away, Will. Okay, I know. Jimmy's been waiting to speak for a little while.
No, I don't want to sidetrack the conversation. You can keep going, Will.
I think we might have lost Will.
Sounds like it.
Sounds like
good. That's good.
That's before the rant.
Yeah,
Jimmy, go.
You're a great speaker, Jimmy.
This is more for the entire fan base here, but I just want to know how in week 5 I could turn on NFL Network and see all this love for Andrew Thomas and Tony and Daniel Jones, and we are in the same spot we were exactly 1 year ago, even with all of these flashes. So who amongst us pissed off the powers that we are just stuck in this stage of constant losing? Where did it come from? Because we were once a proud franchise.
Jimmy, I think that's a fun point that I think Will talks about it a lot too. And if anybody else wants to butt in too, please feel free. Who wants to say something? Carl.
I think it's about to be addressed in the upcoming rant from Will as to why we're in this. We're wallowing.
I'm sorry, boys and girls. I disconnected again. My phone's having a hard time handling all the excitement in this room.
I mean,
let Spartan Mike catch you up on what's going on. Spartan Mike, I mean, congratulations. on a new gig that I heard that you got today. So why don't you let Will know what we got going on, and then he can be caught back up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a great opportunity to get involved with New York Giants Rush. I thank the group for letting me join. I'm looking forward to taking my fandom to the next level and actually writing about the team that I'm so passionate about. 5 years ago, I had a pretty much dormant account, and now I'm getting more heavily involved every single day. So I'm very grateful for that. But the one point I wanted to talk about, and the one thing regarding the Giants, it's been so difficult to get out of this funk, is a big piece of it is the free agency, and we are not an attractive destination for a lot of free agents, especially if they're trying to look for just a couple more years. They're probably looking to go to a championship caliber team, and I do feel as though that we're getting stuck overpaying guys simply because we have to, and there's almost no choice. And that's something that is really difficult to overcome if you are a bad franchise. And I don't really have the answer to that one, but unfortunately, it looks like until you just have a couple miraculous drafts in a row, or you get lucky with some of those under the radar free agent signings, that we may be stuck in this simply because of that. We saw that with teams like the Browns for the whole 2000s and early 2010s, and a couple other teams as well. It is, we're not an attractive destination anymore for those free agents, and I'm afraid that that's going to bleed into coaches as well. But those are my 2 cents on the subject.
So yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, the Giants organization isn't what it used to be. And I think
And Will, one of the things that Jimmy talked about that I know you've talked about a ton is why is it that Jimmy's turning on NFL Network and we're getting compliments on Kadarius Toney, we're getting some compliments on Andrew Thomas, and Daniel Jones is taking steps up, and we're in like that same spot as we were last year. And frankly, record wise, it's a very similar spot record wise as we've been the last previously few years. And I know you have you've had some thoughts on that as time goes on, and Carl says that may go into your rant a little bit.
Okay, so yeah, I mean we're a 1-4 team. We could be 0-5. We could have lost that fumble. We could have had that coin toss go tails. We could be 3-2. We could have certainly beaten Atlanta. We could have certainly beaten Washington. I don't think we really could be 4-1, and I don't think we really could be 5-0 right now. And we've talked about. I think what I'm about to kind of talk about is going to touch on a lot of what's been discussed already tonight. But the Giants have been going in multiple directions simultaneously, and it really shows. We talk about how we're not able to get any continuity on the offensive line. We both have veterans we're trying to validate, in their final years of their contracts with rookie or, with second year players that we may or may not be buying into and we don't want to necessarily draft over. We keep bringing in guys who are essentially, Carl Banks talked about scholarships when Dave Gettleman took over, and he said that Jerry Reese was letting too many guys who've been here just because they had a nice draft pick or they had a nice free agency spot stick around. Well, 4 years later, that's essentially what's happening right now. And we're giving out scholarships. We're not just like saying, okay, you're a 3rd round pick, you get to stay. We're giving out $7.5 million essentially for Kyle Rudolph. And I think there's a lot of sentiment in here, and I want to make sure Craig gets a chance to speak because I know Craig is more of a Rudolph defender than some of the other speakers who are talking right now. But when Kyle Rudolph isn't investing himself in getting in mucking it up in the scrum, and when Kyle Rudolph is not necessarily finishing his block on a guy on a play where the starting quarterback, the franchise quarterback, the guy who's running on plays he shouldn't be running because he's the guy who's trying to put his team on his back, is then ultimately getting injured, and Kyle Rudolph's supposed to be the guy who's teaching kids how to do things the right way. That's how locker rooms are going to start to fracture. And I think, I don't. We're talking about, we're not happy with Joe Judge, but we're not going to get a better coach than Joe Judge right now as long as we don't make conscious efforts in moving on from Dave Gettleman. And I think the question that I need to pose to everybody is right now, are we concerned with making something out of 2021 and making a playoff run in 2021? Or do we want to start saying, all right, let's scrap the table. Let's, figure out what we can get for who we've got and start looking at that long-term question. Because if the answer is either question, but certainly if the answer is a second question, then Dave Gettleman should not be the general manager of the Giants for a minute longer.
Hey, can I jump in real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Please.
So I feel you, man. I want to hit this from, and in no way am I Dave Gettleman apologist because trust me, there's a lot of things that I hate that he did. But I think we forget how how bare our cupboards were through Jerry Reese. I mean, like I pulled this up because I just wanted to refresh my own memory. But like, here's our offensive. Our offensives are starting. The guys who're supposed to lead us through a championship, quote unquote. The last year of Jerry Reese. It was Eli Manning, Orleans Darkwa, Roger Lewis, Sterling Shepard, Rhett Ellison, Evan Ingram, Eric Flowers, John Jerry, Brett Jones,
All right.
John.
Hold on.
Before we
Hold on.
yo.
I want to ask you a question real quick. I got you. The roster was bad. I got you. When Dave Gettleman took over, what draft pick did the Giants have?
And you know what? I will agree with you on that. I think Dave Gettleman's biggest flaw in what he's done is that instead of him hitting the reset button in the beginning, they did try to do that. Let's try to build what we can around Eli, see what we could get with him 1 or 2 years. And I think that was a huge mistake. And
When did Dave Gettleman hit the reset button?
I think he hit the reset button the minute he drafted Daniels.
And the one other piece I want to talk to, because as I just heard from the names that you were listing out, and I want to make this point, is you're talking about at the end of the season, and you've got to remember that roster that you're talking about with Roger Lewis, that has Odell Beckham, that has Brandon Marshall, that has Dwayne Harris, all these guys who are out for the year, and there a whole bunch of other guys on that roster who fit that. So I just wanted to make sure we had that point out there.
No, and I know, and listen. All I'm saying is that we really have to look at. I've seen so far. As much as we beat Dave Gettleman up, I have seen him cut players that he's drafted the very next year after he's drafted them. I've seen him sign a free agent and cut that free agent inside the same year. And with Jerry Reese, it was a wedding. It was a marriage. Like, he wrote them out until they were done, and they'd never be anywhere else in the league again. So I got to give Dave a little more credit than that. I think there's been some mismanagement. There has been some overpaying. But let's think about this. We have a franchise left tackle. We have a franchise quarterback. We have a generational talent in Saquon Barkley. We now have a generational talent that we think we have in Kadarius Toney. If it turns out the guy, we have our right tackle. So we've got some things that we haven't had in a very long time, and that's from Dave Gettleman. So we can't sit here and just bash him because he's also done some good. And I can't say Jerry Reese has done much good.
But wait a second. So we got to remember things. We're talking about Jerry Reese not doing much good. He's 2 Super Bowl rings.
On an Ernie Accorsi core. Let's be real. The core of that team was Ernie Accorsi. Yes, it was. That whole offensive line was built by Ernie Accorsi.
Not 2011.
You can't. Listen. Not even 2007. You can't rewrite history.
I'm not rewriting history. The whole offensive unit and the whole defensive unit, except for the rookies of 2007, were Ernie Accorsi. That was
where do you think Jerry Reese came from?
I understand that. So we're just going to take. So does that apply to every general manager in the league? So it's not them. It's their scouting department.
No.
So come on, we got to be.
No. I understand. I understand.
So okay.
Player personnel.
So there's a lot we got to talk about right now. Jerry Reese took over a roster that was much more ready to compete than Dave Gettleman did. We can all agree on that. The only person I think who wouldn't necessarily agree with that might be Dave Gettleman 3 years ago, who decided to spend as much money as he possibly could. Spent 2 record-setting contracts at 2 different positions with Nate Solder and Odell Beckham. Drafted number 2 overall on a win now pick without the phone, and didn't even have money to put out this win now year. Like, we're talking about what he did and what he didn't do, and we're saying that he didn't hit the reset button. He decided to win now, but he still spent so much money that he had to trade his starting center before the season started because he didn't even figure out how to field a team for that season. So there's a lot that we can start to talk about what happened there. But look, the first 5 years that Jerry Reese was a general manager, from 2007 to 2011, the Giants, their worst year, they were 8-8. Their second worst year, they were 10-6 in the regular season, or you can say the one year that they had a worse regular season record than that, they were 9-7 and won the Super Bowl. So Jerry Reese has a resume. Dave Gettleman, man, he took over. He got everything wrong his first year. He said in the press conference at the end of the year that, "Oh no, you just don't understand why I'm doing everything I'm doing. Look at my resume." Then a year later, he's like, "Oh no, actually, everything I got wrong 2 years ago, it makes it really tough for right now." I mean, besides, and I don't want to talk about what he said because there's enough about what he's done, that's been wrong. But right now, we are spending we've committed so much money in 2022 and 2023, so that whoever takes over next is going to have a hell of a time,
And Will's having a hell of a time with his phone.
Yeah, Will needs to just throw his phone in the garbage.
I think he accidentally muted himself that time.
No, his phone typically restarts.
No, I think you're right, and I did mute myself, but I think I probably did that at the right time because I was starting to get repetitive.
Well, I got a quick question for you. You kind of touched on it a little earlier, kind of like, do we want to, I guess you consider like compete in 2021 or kind of kick the tires and get ahead of the motion for 2022? I think you were alluding to like getting rid of Gettleman at this point to not let him make any moves. How do we do that in a smooth way where we're not hindering the development of a guy like Daniel Jones going into week 6? Like, how do we go through like a smooth transition to a new regime while not taking step backs on the positives we saw progress from already this season, which is pretty important?
It's almost impossible, to be perfectly fair. It all depends on how willing that GM is to keep certain things in place. And the problem is that most GMs, that's their livelihood, that's their job. They're going to come in and want to say, hey, you do a job, I'm going to want to do my job. And, John Mara might just let them do that. It's a tough situation. You just don't see it too often. That's why the Browns were horrible for so long. All these good talent, but every 2 years they were firing and dumping everybody. And every 2 years they were rebuilding. It took forever.
Yeah, so I think I don't think necessarily. I don't think right now you're going to reinvent the wheel. I think right now what has to happen is Dave Gettleman. The organ has to separate from Dave Gettleman. Every fan at this point knows that he's not the long-term answer. And the goalposts, as to quote Weiss himself, the goalposts have been moved for this guy more than anything I've ever seen. We've been close. We've been 1 year away. I mean, in 2018, it wasn't about like, okay, we got more draft picks. We've got more cap space. No, it was we scored more points than other teams in the NFC East, even though we still have a below average, below league average scoring, total. Even though we had more defensive touchdowns than most people in the NFC. This guy pisses on our heads and tells us it's raining. And we talk very specifically about the Maras and their commitment to stability. But what needs to happen is we need to hear from John Mara saying, okay, I understand what's happening right now, and we're stable at the bottom. And I understand, right now not everybody's healthy. It's what Dave Gettleman said at the end of 2018 in his press conference was, I don't want to hear about playing backup quarterbacks. You play who you play. Well, right now, the Giants are playing what we're playing. And last year we've been playing what we're playing. And we've had less injuries than other teams. And he has the nerve to say, well, Saquon wasn't healthy, so what can you really expect? Dave Gettleman has to go right now. And after that, Dave Gettleman going doesn't fix this organization. I don't think anybody in here thinks Dave Gettleman going fixes the organization. But once we show that we're committed to actually changing, then we can at least have the time to have the earnest evaluation that can lead to to asking the questions, that can get the answers that gives this organization some direction.
Do you have? Well, I got a question for you, man. I mean, do you have any like sense or any ideas who you might want to replace Dave Gettleman next year? I mean, I don't see him coming back. So, I mean, we might as well be looking at the next step.
Evan Abrams. Don't say Louis Riddick.
Don't say that, man.
No, I think, the fundamental issue began with, John Mara deciding to, okay, we need to replace Jerry Reese. We need to show some changes, but we need to show some changes while keeping as much intact as possible. Yeah. And we've talked about, keeping a lot of the people in the front office, including his brother, Chris Mara, who has, nobody's done a better job than Weiss and Ethan on their podcast of talking about you can't have a guy who doesn't report to anybody, who isn't accountable for the result of his jobs. But I think what I want to see is objectivity. For a long time, I've wanted somebody from the Patriot school because I've said we've really needed, we've missed somebody who said, okay, geez, maybe it's not about the best player available. Maybe we should also look at trading down. And now with Joe Judge for, all of his game management faults, we do have that. And, we can talk about, is Joe Judge still going to be here if we do get a new general manager? And I don't think that's necessarily a given, but I want objectivity. I want somebody who, will do what Dave Gettleman said he was going to do and put the interests of the New York Giants before the interests of players and, the optics and his own resume. Craig, I've been waiting to hear from you for a while, and, I've been trying to squeeze you in. I know we got a lot of people. How you doing, my man?
What's up, my friend? How are you guys?
Great to hear from you, and I'm glad you and Mike are one now. Look at this.
Yeah, man, we're growing, bringing in the best talent we can. So I appreciate you guys clicking me in. I was going to address something that someone said a couple minutes ago about. It's probably about 15 minutes now because your phone dropped a couple times. the point was somebody was making a point about how do they get back to our 40-yard line all the time? We punt, and right away we're in, they're in scoring opportunity. I think the theme here, and I thought you guys were kind of getting off track, is accountability. Like, I can't change the roster that they have right now. It is what it is, and the players aren't performing at any level. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is tweeting out about his clothing line, So to answer the question to the gentleman who asked a couple minutes ago, how did they get back to the 40 so quickly, is just from a schematic standpoint. I mean, when we rush the quarterback, we're doing safety blitzes and corner blitzes, and they can't take a guy down like Dak down. He's too big. We don't rush the quarterback with pass rushers and outside linebackers. Like, this defense is the problem, and you guys are really focused on the offensive line. Daniel Jones, what Gettleman didn't do. Right now, today, the biggest problem on this team is the defense, and that the fact that they can't stop anyone and get off the field. Your most potent teams. Go ahead.
I want to pose a question to you, and this is a point that I think we've discussed. Some of us have discussed right now. What do you see as the identity of this defense, if anything at all?
Well, I mean, it's always been that bend don't break. That Graham preaches, but it's not working. This team has no stars. Every team has stars. There's no star pass rusher, no star safety, no star corner. The Giants are underperforming at every position. And when you really kind of analyze guys like Carter and Zimenez, Jackson, McKinney, Dexter Lawrence, they're average players who at this point have been schemed out. There's plenty of tape out there on these players. They can't win games for you. So when you're healthy, Jones and Toney and Galladay and Shepard are going to win you some games. They're going to plays. We thought going into the year it was about how bad the offense was going to be. It's a complete 180. This defense can't stop anyone. And while we can complain and bitch and moan about Gettleman, okay, I can't change it. So what do we do about what's going on the field every Sunday? And this defense is just so bad.
What? Yeah, we can't change what's going on the field any more than we can change. And actually, I would venture to you that we can change what's going on right now with Gettleman, because nothing changed in 2007. Things changed in 2017.
But we're trying to win football games. We're trying to win football games right now, not move general managers. If he gets fired tomorrow, okay, what does that do for the Rams game and the Eagles game? Right now, it's personnel and what these coaches can do to put these players in the best position possible. And, when you're running a Dory Jackson with a 12-yard cushion, or when you're not stunting guys, I mean, right now, you guys you're looking at big picture. I get it. But, it's only game 5. They have to put something into this team to go for it, whatever they're going to do. So I wish that we would stay on track on, what are we going to do to win football games right now at week 5? Because, yes, there will be a change.
I mean,
but right
what,
now,
what do you think? What do you think they can do at 1-4 right now, given their personnel? What can they do to win games?
That's my point. I mean, you have supposedly upgraded on the 9th, ranked defense, and now they're ranked 28th. You supposedly added a better corner. You supposedly added better pieces, and now you realize that maybe they're not.
Craig, I know we spoke this preseason. I think I voiced some of the concerns about some of this defense. And I said that that you can't just look at okay, we allowed there are only 8 teams who allowed more points than us, and we added some free agents, and now we're going to be a better defense. And that narrative did certainly gain water, but I don't think that's necessarily what a lot of the people here are talking about. But this season right now is at a crossroads. Our starting quarterback is recovering from a concussion. We're at 1-4 in a must-win game, essentially, where we're a 10.5-point underdog. And the question is, if Joe. It's terrifying right now of your attitude, which, I completely understand of we need to win games. What terrifies me right now is that we risk Jones's long-term health because we're so scared of going 1-5 and tarnishing Dave's resume, essentially, because Jones, we're not ready to move on.
From a guy with a lot of concussion experience, I could tell you that Ronnie Barnes isn't going to let him play if he's not ready to play. The guy's been with the organization longer than any executive in that building besides John Mara. If he's not ready to play, he won't play. I've had 7 concussions. I'm pretty close to the situation. I don't think he should play. It does take a long time to shake those cobwebs out and feel 100%. But I don't think Ronnie Barnes really gives a shit what Joe Judge says. I mean, this guy has been on, like I said, he's been with the organization longer than anyone for a reason. Is it in the best interest of Dave Gettleman? I don't think anyone's looking at the best interest of Dave Gettleman when it comes to Jones playing or not. Jones shouldn't play.
Craig, do you think that Sterling Shepard has ever played before before he should have played? Even under Ronnie Barnes' leadership.
You're talking about concussion wise?
Yes.
No.
Wait, time out. Will, real quick. Wait, Craig, you said you had 7 concussions?
Yes.
Holy cow! How are you alive?
Well, I'll tell you. So every body has what they call EPO. Your body is mapped with a cell that gets released when your brain has an injury to it. So there's EPO 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. If you're double mapped from your mom and your dad with EPO 4, okay, that's the slowest releasing chemical in the body. So if you have your mom has EPO 4 and your dad has EPO 4, you're double mapped with EPO 4. That means that chemical that protects your brain upon a hit is very slow. So you're going to recover a whole lot slower than somebody who's mapped with EPO 1. Okay. So when you get guys have concussions where they're throwing up, they don't know their name, they can do genetic tests. They take a piece of your skin and they can genetically test to see how you're mapped. I am fortunate. I haven't got a genetic test, but I've had fairly good success in my 30s and 40s because evidently I must have a better mapped system than some other folks.
Craig, I don't want to
playing football, Craig?
I don't want to take
for those
for
just joining the
granted,
call.
but I want to keep this on the Giants and not, concussion history. But
No, I was just gonna say for people who just joined the call, this is actually a medical seminar. This is no longer Giants boiling point.
Daniel Jones should not.
Basically, a TED
Daniel
talk.
Jones should not be playing, and I don't think that Sterling Shepard was playing under the pretenses of, "Hey, I'm going to play, and Ronnie Barnes is going to let me play." I do not think that happened.
Okay, that's a fair point. Greg,
Well, I got a question, man. I mean,
Yeah, what's up,
because you
Mike?
kind of brought up about Gettleman's resume, and they wouldn't want him to tarnish his resume, but it's not really Gettleman's call, is it? And I don't really know.
No,
if anybody...
Okay, and I want to be very clear, and I'm certainly guilty sometimes of letting figures of speech, get in the way of a point I'm trying to make. No, I do not think there's any chance in the world that Dave Gettleman is saying Daniel Jones isn't ready to play, but I want him to play for me. That's not what's going to happen. Frankly, I don't think that Dave Gettleman ever, I don't think that's the kind of person he is, even though I don't think very highly of Dave Gettleman. I don't think he's ever had that, authority and that he'd be able to get away with it. And I certainly don't think he has that authority now. What I was combining kind of is I've thought that Dave Gettleman has put short-term optics on his resume above the best interests of the Giants before. I think he did that with, signing Golden Tate, getting in the way of the rebuild. I think he did that trading for Leonard Williams when he was looking at 2-14 in the face. But I don't think that, I was just saying that, as kind of a figure of speech is saying, like, are we so desperate to win now that we're going to say, okay, like anything you can do to get him on the field?
I get it.
I just wanted to address one thing really fast. I've heard a lot of this conversation. I do contest the idea that Dave Gettleman is not in this for himself. And I think Will just nailed a lot of those points, specifically the Leonard Williams trade. But I am more frustrated with the idea that every single goalpost gets moved for him. Will also nails that. This is infuriating. They'll probably risk Daniel Jones going out there because they're so desperate to avoid 1-5.
No,
Just
crazy.
like they were desperate with the first one. I understand, Craig, but I am frustrated.
We're all frustrated, but they're not going to. Ronnie Barnes is not going to greenlight him if he has a problem.
Yeah, I don't think Dave Gettleman has the power to necessarily force Daniel Jones to play.
I just want you guys to hold the players accountable. That's all I'm looking for in this conversation.
I hold the players accountable perfectly fine, but the problem is we're at a point where we seem to be so blinded by everything else that has happened.
Can I say one thing about the players? Here's a couple weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast, Michael Lombardi, not Matt Lombardi, who covers his team, Michael Lombardi, and they were talking about the Giants, and he brought up a point about how people around the league believe that the Giants overvalue themselves and overvalue their players. And particularly last week on the defense side of the ball, it clicked for me, like, yeah, that is true. Like, for so long, we talk about, like, the pass rush, for example, Lorenzo Carter, O'Shane Zimenez, and people are like, why are these guys not – where's the breakout? Where is the breakout? How come we're not generating a pass rush? Well, maybe it's because they're just not good. And for the entirety of their young careers, we've just kept thinking that they're going to be good, when in reality they're not good. And, the same can be said about other guys, on this roster too, where we sort of set the standard at a certain point because that's just who we are as fans. But in reality, those guys are not that. And I think that that's something that I realize. And it's not just the pass rush, it's the interior of the defensive line, too. Like, I've spoken about this with Dexter Lawrence. I think Dexter Lawrence is a good player. I would not have drafted him with the 17th overall pick. And I'm not inclined to give him a long-term deal because I think you can find another Dexter Lawrence without using, without spending money, without using a premium pick. Like, that's just the reality of it. That doesn't mean
Amen.
that doesn't mean that Dexter Lawrence is a bad player. He's a limited player and he does those limited things well. I just think the way the game is played today, I need to go and use a first-round pick on Dexter Lawrence.
Before
Or
we
at
say
least,
anything else, I want to welcome in a couple folks who've recently joined. We got Eli, and at long overdue, I think we finally got Pest ready to speak a little bit and elevate the energy in this room.
Oh God, say your prayers.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. How are we feeling tonight?
Better now, Pest. Better now.
Are we still raging? Is smoke still coming out of our ears? Are we ready to go and light some torches and grab some pitchforks yet, or what?
Well, Sunday's
Hey,
around
listen,
the corner.
listen.
I'm ready to murder.
Listen,
somebody,
at this point,
but that's
it's justified to grab a pitchfork and do what we got to do at this point, right? Because
of
at the
course
end of the
it is.
day, you look at this roster and you say, okay, is this the right players? Is this the right mixture? And you kind of sit back and say, okay, these are good base role playing guys. Like Greg said earlier, we're missing that all-star on the team that's going to make something happen for us. We're missing that playmaker. And ultimately, this lies on Dave Gettleman's feet. How long is this parade going to happen? How long are we going to sit in these chat rooms and complain about the Giants and what they're missing? Right now, this has to fall on the general manager. We have to look at that option. Is the head coach in on the chopping block as well? Could be, absolutely. But the fact that he's a second-year head coach, they're going to give him that next year. But the conclusion is we definitely going to have to explore a new GM at the end of the season. That's just my opinion.
What Craig says is right. It is about the players, but Dave Gettleman set the standard of it's not just about who's in the locker room. It's also or what ingredients you have. It's also about the culture, and we have to understand is Dave Gettleman and his just lack of direction wears on the culture. Like these players aren't stupid. Like when Eli Apple is clearly a bad apple, no pun intended, and then still gets a chance, and then shipped off 7 weeks later, like something's weird. When they're getting rid of the guys who can help win games so they can keep Eli for 2 weeks after they're saying, oh no, we've really got a plan, and then they clearly don't, and they have Golden Tate and Kyle Rudolph and these guys who are here to collect paychecks. Like the players get it. The players, don't, they talk to each other and they're saying like, what the hell is going on right now? And you can't, we've got to get our ducks in a row, and it can't happen right now with this elephant over the room. And I think that fans on Sunday need to make noise just like we did in 2017 and say, this can't keep happening. We want this guy's head.
Yeah, and to Craig's point of what does firing a GM do? Like, I think it does motivate a locker room because some big up at your company gets like the can, like Jesus, that sends ripples throughout the entire organization. Like, oh God, like we got to do something. Like maybe not that tangible, but it also lets us get a head start on finding a better guy. It lets us get a head start on, maybe we can interview Mike Borgonzi or however the hell you pronounce that guy's name for the Chiefs, or some people in the Colts organization or something. It just gives us a head start because the common theme throughout what everybody's saying is it's inevitable. Gettleman's gonna get fired. Like, let's get ahead of this, and then we can, we just get a head start.
I'd also argue
ahead of
it
everybody
would
else.
make the stadium a lot happier. It certainly would improve the aura around this place. It certainly would make a lot of people feel less hopeless, which again goes back to the first thing I said at the start of this. This feels hopeless right now, and you need a direction.
Can I just quickly change the temperature just for 1 second, and then we can go back to boiling. Can I just change?
That's literally why you're here.
Yeah, I'm getting a little hot, Pest. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just change the temperature for a second because I know the reason why we all collectively come together once, twice, 3 times a week. Sometimes seems like we're doing a lot of these Twitter Spaces, throughout the week. But I just want to kind of switch the focus for a second, because there's over 400 people in this Twitter Space right now. I believe the other night we had like upwards of 100. in a Twitter space that we did right after the game, and I just want to say this, man. This community that we are building, right? No matter what, no matter whether we're pissed off, no matter where we're content, no matter where we're trying to be patient, but this community that we are building right now is awesome. Okay, and I'm going to be completely honest. When I decided that I was going to be, the dinner's ready. When I decided that when I decided that I was going to become a part of this community as a content creator, right? This is what I wanted to achieve, is this right here, okay? The fact that we can get a bunch of people to come together, and even though we don't agree, we are able to have this dialogue, because honestly, regardless of what this team does, and I want to win, by the way, okay? On-field murder, don't forget. Regardless of what this team does, this right here is what's more important. Is us building a community and us being able to come together as a family once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week and have these conversations. I just want to say that every single person that's sitting in this Twitter space right now, thank y'all, okay? Thank y'all for coming here and listening. Thank those who have the gumption to hit that request to speak button and give your thoughts, whether we agree with them or not, whether we say that they're smart or dumb as hell. Thank y'all, man. Like seriously, from the bottom of my heart, because I feel like a proud father right now. I like to say that my interactions with a lot of the people who are constantly in here with the talk button on, you know what I'm saying, my interactions has helped fester this. Vibes interactions has helped fester this. Justin, Giants Rush. I saw the Madge was in here. I saw Hefe in here, man. This is amazing, okay? And as long as we continue to do this, it's not going to matter what this team does, but it is going to matter because I want someone to get murder on the field. Turn the temperature back up. This team stinks.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that point.
Honestly, I could proudly say I have been waiting for that for so long, for about almost 2 hours now. So, Pez, thank you for that. I love the murder scene and everything, but the positivity is great. And Will, I do want to thank you for really putting this together these last 2 times that we've had everybody in here. It's great discussion. Carl, you're still in here. I wanted to say, I'm going to go back to being miserable just for a second because I'm a miserable, stubborn fuck. But
that's why we love you. That's why we love you, Snap.
I appreciate it. We're built to the same cloth. I love you too, Pez. And I'm sorry I just used the F word. It's really inappropriate, but I'm pissed. So, Carl, you were saying that a GM change in the middle of the year that could spark something. And Will, that's what you said. Like we cannot go any longer with him as the general manager. And Carl, you brought up the analogy of like the top guy in your company gets fired. Well, that could put everybody on notice as a Giant, because this is all the players on his team that we have to hold accountable for. He brought in. So if he's getting canned in the middle of the year of another lost season, don't you think that may put the players on notice too? Like, oh, okay, are we not that good? Does that liven them up a little bit? Does that make them practice harder? I don't know. But that definitely sends airwaves through the whole organization, through the whole roster. Everybody gets put on notice when the general manager, the top dog, gets fired. So I think without a shadow of a doubt, this man cannot be the general manager a single day longer, because if we lose Sunday and then you lose after that, you're staring at 1-6, 1-7. Do we really want this guy possibly making trades? Because I sure as hell don't. So I think.
Anyone else seen that news about the cornerbacks?
Yeah, I was going to ask I don't even want to think about that thought.
I knew that's exactly word for word what Snaz next was going to respond. I don't even want to go there.
I don't even want to go there. I'm sorry. I am not trying to dismiss your point, but that absolutely would make me sick to my stomach, and I am always sick to my stomach every single day of the week. So I cannot have it double today. I'm sorry. Anyway,
the one I saw that was somewhat interesting. If we trade for Kyle Fuller and make the Bears worse so they lose more games.
Oh, God.
Is that like 3D chess?
It is chess, not checkers. But at the end of the day, I am all aboard.
Wow.
We cannot have Dave Gettleman. Will, everybody knows now that you were right. Since 2018, you beat it into a dead horse over and over and over, and I can understand why people would get annoyed, but you care, and you were right. I hated you the first time I saw you start tweeting. I hated you. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, he's right. And now everybody starts to realize it. I am fully on board, and I'm going to stop ranting because now I'm starting to sweat and hyperventilate a little bit, and I don't like doing that. I'm going to stop here, but I am fully on board that not one single more day can this man run this organization.
Snacks, what are you drinking right now, Snacks?
What am I drinking? Listen.
Wait, can I guess?
You could try.
Where's old Peanut?
No,
I want to hold the focus on the Giants.
I got a cold bottle of water right here.
I want to hold the focus on the Giants right now. And
Asshole.
Sorry.
Something that's next, kind of picked up on the end is, I've definitely taken, heat from Giants Twitter, and I brought it on myself, and that's something that I've totally, head first gone into. And, Ethan, who's another good friend of a lot of the people who are, hosting this right now, he and I, met, obviously going into 2018, as a lot of people have come to know, and he got a lot of grief basically, and I saw people giving him a hard time, and I was basically like, all right, you guys don't want this being said so badly. I'm going to make sure, and be even louder and making sure, no matter what, people say about it. But, more seriously, I don't care about the credit about anything like that. I want Giants fans to agree with each other, but there's been a fracture in this fan base with people who want to believe the GM and people who can't figure out a way to believe the GM. And, I don't want to attack anybody for having faith in the front office, but it's been very clear for years now that this guy makes promises that he doesn't follow through on. I mean, even as simple as like in 2018 when we were setting the training camp roster, and he's like, we're going to keep the best 53. Oh, and yeah, we're going to keep Alex Tanian. Oh, and yeah, we're going to keep, Jonathan Stewart, and, while cutting seven guys and turning over the roster at the end and churning things and letting Romeo Okwara go. I mean, he's not, he's very clearly shown that he's been in over his head, and stability for the sake of stability is what leads to this, cycle of misery. And I want to hear from the people who, have certainly given Gettleman more credit than I have, because, I think, what Stas was talking about earlier, there have been things that he's gotten right. And if Daniel Jones is an answer, power to him. But I want to see somebody objective, and I can't, and on a personal level, I just can't see this person representing this franchise anymore.
So I'll kind of jump in really quick. I think for the most part, well, at this point, for the majority of people in here, you're probably preaching to the choir. I don't think there's too many people in here who are going to fight you on keeping Dave Gettleman moving forward, whether that's tomorrow or at the end of the year. But I kind of want to circle back to something you were saying before that has to do with Gettleman, where you were talking about, Rudolph collecting checks and Solder collecting checks and things like that. And my question is, and again, like you, I'm still relatively a Joe Judge supporter, and I don't want to jump to conclusions, and I don't necessarily want him fired. But with those players that you mentioned, just collecting checks, at what point is it on the coaching staff that they don't play? Why is Caden Smith not playing? Why is Matt Pert not playing? Why did it take 3-4 weeks to get Kadarius Toney on the field on any kind of consistent basis? That's not the GM. And as much as I like Judge, there's no reason why Kyle Rudolph should be on the field over Caden Smith. There's no reason anymore why Matt Pert should not be playing over Nate Solder. There's no reason why Kadarius Toney should not have had somewhat of a bigger role earlier in the season.
Well, the only piece on the Toney thing is obviously he's coming back from COVID. He had some injuries and he didn't know anything about the playbook. So I absolutely will, pound my chest agreeing with almost everything you're saying, but I will add that one caveat there.
Sure, and I understand the coming off of the COVID thing, and it affects everybody differently, so we'll never know for sure. But as soon as he gets any type of volume, he produces. He produced. So was he just magically ready in week 4, or is there something else there? Is there some type of philosophy thing where you have to earn your stripes or whatever, as opposed to just putting the best players on the field? And I can't imagine why a coaching staff wouldn't do that. And none of us are NFL coaches, but I think it's pretty damn clear that Caden Smith should be tight end 2. Some people will say tight end 1. I think it's pretty clear that Matt Pert should be starting over Nate Solder.
And you got to remember also, with the Caden Smith thing is so weird because it's like, Caden Smith looked promising as a tight end 1, I think overrated. And you got to remember that he was a guy who was really isolated by, who was really emphasized by Lunda Wells, who was let go after 2019, the former tight end coach. But what's so bizarre is like, last year they signed Toilolo to try to play over him, and Toilolo was pretty terrible. And then they brought Toilolo back again while adding Kyle Rudolph too before Toilolo got hurt. It's like, they keep trying to find reasons to not play Caden Smith, and he, let alone the price tag, I think he offers a lot more than Rudolph does as a player.
And I know Craig likes this a lot too.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It just doesn't. You've got three tight ends and 2 fullbacks on this team. So yeah, I can talk all day about Caden Smith. I mean, if you want a sample size, 3 games, 2019, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns. The kid can block and he catches everything you throw at him, but for some reason he can't get on the field. I don't know if that's Garrett. I don't know who it is, but yeah, I'm right with you. Lock and step on that. Like, what do you have to lose? Let the kid play. He's 6'6".
And what I want people to also think about is the Giants came into the season. Yeah, we've had a lot of injuries, but the roster makeup on offense really makes you scratch your head. So hypothetically, there are 5 skill position players on the field, unless you have a 6 OL set. So essentially, you have 500% of snaps to give out for the entire offense. If you're following that, 100% 5 times over. So say you've got Galladay and Shepard as your top 2 receivers, each getting 75%. Okay, that's 150%. Barkley and then Booker spelling in, comes up to pretty much close to 100%. That's another 100%. Then you've got the tight end situation. The snaps are pretty much accounted for before you even get into the tight end 2, the tight end number 3, Darius Slayton, John Ross, Kadarius Toney, like we're talking about. Like, the Giants have invested significant resources and not really had a snaps to go around. So 1 second, I just got a message. I want somebody else to take over for a second.
All right, yeah. So, Will, it's a great point because I feel like every single year, we really love our tight end too. Hey, we gotta get Brad Ellison involved. Hey, who was this Toilolo guy? And at the end of the day, the NFL is so much lining up a lot in 11 personnel, where you have 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back, and the Giants are one of the teams that actually uses 12 personnel, 13 personnel the most. But still, this year, Giants are lining up at 12 personnel 25% of the time, and pretty much every single year they've had 3 tight ends that could realistically be getting reps. So somebody that I want to let talk right now currently has his hand up, which I love that feature. My guy Benny Taylor has his podcast of his own. I've been on the show a couple times. So Benny, what do you got from us for us, brother? This is your first time on the space that we've done it a couple times. So welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And yes, Justin has been on my show before. And just going back to the Kyle Rudolph signing, I think you were on my show when it broke. I just didn't get it. Like, why? You have Evan Ingram. You have to trade him, or you have to trade him at that point, in my opinion. It just doesn't make any sense. Caden Smith should be the number 1, but he's not. So there's just so many roster problems with this team. It's a mess.
That's not a roster problem. That's a coaching problem. Put him on the field.
But why did you sign Kyle Rudolph? That's a waste of $10 million.
Okay, agree. That is a personnel department problem. Okay, but I don't care. My coaches should not care about the contracts. Put the best players on the field, especially if you want to keep your job.
Yeah, but for me, it goes back to roster construction. If you're gonna sign Rudolph, which I was fine with at the time, you have to trade Evan Ingram, and especially when his value, it's a lot lower now. Especially when he made his debut at MetLife and he dropped a pass, his value continues to go down. So you have to trade Evan Ingram at that point, or just don't sign Rudolph. It's a waste of $10 million, and the Giants are going to need that money this offseason. They don't have a lot of cap room, even with the cap raising.
Benny, I'm right there with you, man. When we signed Rudolph, that was the first thing I pointed to is, like, if they're not trading Ingram after this, then, like, what are we doing? Because Caden Smith is one of the better blocking tight ends in this league. We're always out there overpaying Red Ellisons of the world or whatever to get that blocking tight end. We had one who's making this roster, is capable, and now we bring in Rudolph, and now he's relegated to tight end 3. Shouldn't be, because he's clearly better than Rudolph, and we're just not using him. Could be tight end 1. I don't get it. That was something that always bothered me from day one.
I mean, do you think that that the Giants signed Rudolph kind of as collateral in case Ingram failed again? Because that's what I thought the whole signing was about. I don't.
Yeah,
really
Mike.
know
That's a great point because the Giants initially started to go after Hunter Henry. Now, I don't think they were very in Hunter Henry because he was going to get big money elsewhere, because the Giants didn't necessarily have the big money to throw, knowing that they maybe wanted to go after Galladay. But there were some points of this offseason where they were going after Hunter Henry and Leonard Floyd before they were going after Kenny Galladay and Adoree Jackson. So this offseason had the potential of some phone calls were made or some offers were accepted here and there. This offseason had the potential to be a lot more different. And the thing is I actually prefer the Giants' plan B and going after Galladay and Adoree Jackson versus Hunter Henry and Hunter Henry and Leonard Floyd. Leonard Floyd is obviously edge help, and this team needs edge help. But I'm just not that big of a fan of what Floyd has to offer as a player. So Rudolph is definitely the one big red flag. $10 million going to him. That's obviously a big no-no when you have a guy like Caden Smith on the team. But Mike, that's a great point, because them being interested in Hunter Henry, that does tell me that there's very little chance that they're investing in Evan Ingram pretty much after this year, because he's on a contract year.
You want to know what else is annoying? The Giants keep bringing in guys, and Justin, you brought this up on your podcast with the mailbag episode, and Bobby, you guys brought this up. They bring in guys, I just feel like when they get here, they don't care. Prime example, there's that fight in Dallas right at the end of the game. And what does Rudolph do? He turns his back. That just annoys me. You guys, I coach baseball. That's what my podcast mostly is. I also cover the Giants very passionately. It's just you're a team. You have to defend your guys. That starts basically at the younger levels. And it just seems like with Nate Solder sometimes, he's not trying. And it's just why bring these guys in?
Yeah, and frankly, what you're doing by starting Nate Solder every single week and by starting Kyle Rudolph every single week, you're ultimately making it a reminder that, these guys were mistakes. These guys were huge, huge mistakes. I mean, especially Solder. I mean, by running him out there, you're making it known, this is clearly Dave Gettleman's worst free agent move. And the fact that every single other analyst from another team that clips up videos for their team, the talking point is, hey, even though our edge rusher didn't have any sacks, look at the reps that he was able to put up against Nate Solder. That is a talking point every single week. And you're making it more known, and just keep that reminder going that was the worst move by not starting Matt Parrott, and then even including not playing Nate Solder as well. So who else wants to chat? I know David. David, you've been in here for quite a while, and you haven't had a chance to speak. Are you still with us, my friend? David.
Monty, how you doing, man?
What's up, guys? Hey, I cut myself off there. Hey, I had one thing to throw onto that. On top of what you were saying there, Justin, is not only are they making themselves look bad with a constant reminder of those guys out there, but also you're cutting off reps from Caden Smith and Matt Parrott, who can actually grow and get better, who are at least as good as these guys and can improve. Well, we're just throwing away reps with Solder and Rudolph, who are not going to improve at all. They're on the downhill. So, it's just bad. It's just bad for the future of this team as well.
Yeah, and on the other side of it is, okay, yeah, they have the opportunity to prove if they're good, but they also have the opportunity to prove if they're bad. And that is, if anything, just as useful as proving that you're good and proving that you're somewhat of an answer. But it's all right, well, if Matt Parrott is going to get in there and he's bad, well, we clearly know that one of those 2 first-round picks next year, could be going to a right tackle, could be going to an offensive lineman, since it's looking like there are some guys that could be promising. And we know that possibly, hey, tight end, you don't necessarily need to draft a tight end like you did in the first round with Evan Ingram. You can get some guys in the latter part of the draft if you understand positional value. That's a target that we could look out for. Having that kind of game plan of knowing, what positions you may need, and it goes back to a point that we said earlier about, evaluating your roster correctly. And if you don't give Caden Smith and Matt Parrott the opportunity to play, then you could overestimate, these guys can play, these guys can be starters because there's hope and there's promise around them, but we realistically haven't seen them over a 16, now 17 game stretch. So
totally agree. And yeah, I mean, that you just got to see what you have. I mean, we never gave Matt Parrott a shot. And I'm not necessarily that I thought Matt Parrott was going to be great after he didn't start, but I'm I can't believe it until I see it. I need to see what he does in a full game, and he didn't get that chance. And if you don't give him that chance, that's how you get a Romeo Okwara walk away, because you never really saw him start.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden he breaks out somewhere else because you didn't give him a chance and you've got his replacement.
Exactly.
It's funny because as I listen to you guys, a lot of things that you are saying are things that I have said or thought. As a guy who, for a little bit there, vehemently defended Dave Gettleman, right? I vehemently defended him early in his tenure. And I will say that Dave Gettleman.
Pass. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off and give the floor to somebody else who's very special, who's obviously a legend for the New York Giants, and who needs no introduction to anybody here. We are joined, and I can't believe I'm saying this, by the great Carl Banks. Carl, thank you so much for joining us, and please let's hear what you have to say.
Well, I just want to say one thing really quick, that you guys are just incredible. You're killing it. everybody that's speaking is so coherent in their criticism, and the dialogue has been incredible. So I enjoy this, folks. But I did have one thing that I wanted to just chime in on, and then I'll just hang up and listen, as they say. In regards to the defense and their lack of performance. And, I thought, like most of you coming out of training camp, that this would be the group that kind of held the rope until the offense got going. And it's actually the opposite now. And what I am seeing, and you guys are making some great points, but what I'm seeing is a horrible team defense in terms of tackling. They're one of the worst tackling defenses I've seen. And every team needs role players. You've had Dave Towlson, you've had Chase Blackburns, nondescript players that just make plays when they're supposed to, right? And I heard the criticism of Zimenez and Carter, and you guys make some great points. But the Giants had the top 2 defensive tackle free agents in the market this offseason. And they chose the more athletic one, the one who could impact games. And right now, for whatever reason, he's not impacting games. And then you have Dexter Lawrence is another guy who can impact games. And I never get into, how much a guy makes, right? But I will say this much. You have to play like they pay. And I don't think, for whatever reasons, and I look at film every week, they are not playing like they're getting paid. Because, there are teams that can double team you. You can consider that a compliment, or you can consider it a challenge. Aaron Donald considers it a challenge, and he defeats those guys. Some of the better guys in this league do that. Can other players around them, the support players, help them in a lot of areas? Absolutely. Make their job easier. But they're just, I count, it's probably 10 tackles a game behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage that end up being 11-yard gains. You can't play defense that way. And that's why someone said, why does it always seem like the other team gets to the Giants 40 in the blink of an eye? It's because it's the 7 and 8 yard a pop plays. And as it relates to their pass rush, and I think Justin can tell you this, the league has gone to getting the ball. You see the stat every week, balls out in 2 point whatever seconds, right? Well, it's pretty hard to get a sack if you can't create a negative play on first and second downs, because if you're going to be second or third and 3, you can have whoever you want out there as a pass rusher. Unless they're shot out of a rocket, they're not going to get a sack. You've got to create negative plays, and that's where your pass rush can impact the game. So my point is, the more they keep missing these tackles, the less you'll see of an impactful pass rush. But by the same token, your best players do have to play better. I'm going to shut up, and I'll continue to listen. Thank you, guys, and keep up the great work.
Carl, thank you so much for joining. Carl's very right in saying that,
So awesome.
in terms of the negative plays for this Giants defense, it comes in the form of sacks, it can come in the form of interceptions, and it would also come in the form of tackles for loss. And we know the things on the top of our head of a James Bradbury dropped interception against Dallas, 2 Logan Ryan dropped interceptions against Atlanta, a dropped interception against Atlanta for Adoree Jackson. The Giants are also 3rd least in the NFL in tackles for losses right now. They had the 8th most tackles for losses in 2020. The sacks that they were able to produce, while it wasn't anything above average, spectacular, like Pittsburgh Steelers level, but still, when you produce those negative plays at an above average rate at sack wise, it helps the defense, and that's just it's non-existent. And that's why I'm a little bit more apt to put it on player production. The defensive struggles, player production versus scheme, even though the scheme is somewhat different with the 2 high system, I'm somewhat more apt to put it on the player production because of exactly what Carl was saying. The boys up front aren't winning, and there's interceptions and negative plays that are in the hands of the secondary, and they're just flat out not making them right now.
But I will just say this real quick. Didn't, even last year, as good as our defense was, didn't there seem to be a bit of an issue with the bend, don't break defense,
Yes.
giving up tons of yards every game, but not that many points? And really kind of actually continued into this year.
I got something on that, Mike.
The tackling is completely lost itself in the red zone. I don't know.
Yeah, I got something on that, Mike, and that's a great point, because there's a lot of similarities that this Giants defense has in some statistical areas this last year, but there are some that are very different. And the average depth of target that the Giants are allowing in the pass game, it's kind of very similar. Like, they're still allowing, they're not. Patrick Graham's not allowing his opposing offenses to throw the ball deep down the field over and over again. It is that middle of the field, and I think when you play that too high, you're apt to leave the middle of the field wide open. But last year, the Giants allowed a touchdown for every red zone possession 50.8% of the time. That was the second best in the NFL. This year, it's 63.2% of the time they're allowing a touchdown every red zone visit. That is a huge, substantial difference. So yes, Mike, you are totally right. Where last year, they did have that bend but don't break mentality, but this year, they're not clamping down once teams cross the 50-yard line. They're not clamping down once teams get inside the 20, and they're allowing 3 instead of 7. This year, they're allowing 7, and that's the thing that's really kind of hurting them, where they're allowing yards, just like they did last year. They're allowing time of possession per drive like they did last year, but it's not executing in the key spots where they were last year. That's really hurting them.
I just want to say again how cool it is to have just heard from Carl Banks as we're having a conversation among Giants fans, from our own homes. It's just, I mean, it's like the whatchamacallit, the Paul Rudd meme. Like, look at us, who would have thought? Not me.
Yeah, that's the coolest thing ever.
So thank you, Carl. Yeah.
But not me. Don't thank me. Definitely thank the other Carl, the way better Carl.
Oh, I did.
The thing that I think might be a good transition to another topic that relates to this is, like, the first thing you're taught in football is how to tackle. And this head coach, that the first thing he talked about in his press conference was stressing fundamentals. And to Carl's point, dude, I see it over and over again. The missed tackles are so killer. Like, it's so frustrating. And I think I'm going to open it up to other people to talk about our head coach, because I could go on a 50-minute diatribe about his conservatism and his personnel decisions and his game management that's been god awful.
But you're not.
But I'll let other people talk about that if you want, or I can keep going.
Carl, I have a question real fast. And this goes for everybody here. Do you think, given some of his decisions and the way that he talks, do you think he's been told behind closed doors, whispered ear, you're safe no matter what?
No, I will say that I don't think so. I think that I would say that the Giants have every reason to want to keep Joe Judge, and it has to be a real disaster for that plan to change. I mean, he had a 5-year, I think, like $25 million contract or something like that. I think they might still be paying Ben McAdoo this year. So, you really don't want to have a situation where cycling through coaches, because and we might be seeing it right now. I think I'm higher on Joe Judge than certainly, Cartoon Carl. But I would say that, there are concerns right now. And I do think that the story that the Giants were interested in Ron Rivera and didn't get a chance to do it to get there because they kept Shermer on through the end of week 17 and Washington got the head start in interviewing Rivera might have some legs. But you've got to remember that Ben McAdoo started 2016. They were 11-5, and he had the best active record in the regular season among all head coaches. And I think when they played the Rams in 2017, Ben McAdoo still had a winning record in his 2 seasons as a Giants head coach, and he was fired 3 or 4 games later, is obviously with extenuating circumstances with benching Eli. But people forget how quickly things can change in the NFL, both for the good and for the bad. And I don't think there's any chance that the Giants would handicap themselves in saying that you're safe, and even if we do have another GM, they're going to have to be stuck with you, because that would just perpetuate the cycle of not being objective. So I would say with conviction that that's not what happened.
So I just, first of all, Mr. Banks, I'm honored to be able to hear your voice and engage with you, sir. Been a fan of yours. Grew up watching you. We were so the point of the head coach. Okay, when we hired Joe Judge, there was kind of a bit of an outrage because we didn't know who he was, and then he talked, right, and it changed everybody's perspective about this man. And for me, it frustrates me, kind of like the other Carl had said, because he comes in and he talks about fundamentals, he talks about preparation, he talks about attention to detail, he talks about execution. And these are all things, as fans, these are the things that we want to hear, right? Because for so long, the preparation seemed to be off, the execution seemed to be off, the fundamentals seemed to be off. And so for me, as I look at this team, as I look at this roster, regardless of the injuries, right? Because injuries are going to happen in football, and it's always a next man up mentality. But regardless of the injuries, I've looked at this roster and I've said to myself, man, vast improvement, and we can't go anywhere but up. But then we watch the product on the field. And I think that's what irritates me the most, is because I feel like, aside from maybe a piece here or a piece there, we've got a really good roster. The core of this roster is really good. And we don't always agree on a player here or a player there, or a contract here or a contract there. But overall, this roster, to me, this is just my personal opinion, feels good. I'm so confused as to the product, the end result. I'm sure these players are working hard. I'm sure
Here's
these
the
players
thing.
are preparing. Yes, sir.
All of those things can be true, and they still play bad, because playing defense is about intent. It's about execution. And when you have your best players dropping interceptions are not bonus points. They are opportunities to keep another team out of the end zone. Case in point, the Adoree Jackson interview, like they bend but didn't break, right? They had one more opportunity to end the game against Atlanta. He dropped it. That drop gave the offense another opportunity. They kicked the field goal and they win the game. So when I say play like they pay, is what I'm talking about. It's not just good enough to have the name on the back of your jersey. The name on the back of the jersey and what they paid you to do, you've got to show up and do it. That's the bottom line. And that's not, and whatever happens in the front office is going to happen, right? But right now, the product on the field is what you're talking about. They could be better as individual and as a group. And I think that's where the accountability aspect of it, and I'm not telling you they're not trying. I know they play hard. I can't say there hasn't been one game this year where they haven't played hard, but have they played smart? The things to help themselves.
These present themselves, and you have guys that
you have these guys that have opportunities to be game changers. That's when your luck changes during the course of a game too. So they've got to be able to take advantage of opportunities. And your best players have to be those ones that carry the rest of the team. Rising tide floats all boats. And you got some players that can do that. They can lift the level of play, but they've got to be able to do that. That's the point. Like when you talk about the product on the field, it is what it is now, right? Whatever happens to Dave Gettleman is going to happen. That's not going to change the play on the field. Only the players can change the play on the field. And they've got to be, they've got to have a sense of, okay, if it's going to happen and I get an opportunity, I'm going to take advantage of it for this team, because missed interceptions, they only help the offense. Missed turnovers, they only help the offense. So when we discuss the scheme, right? Well, we don't know if the scheme is working or not. I know that guys are in place to make tackles and they miss them. So the scheme got them in place, but they miss tackles, right? You have guys that are individual talent that gets them in position to make interceptions, and they don't, and they result in scores. So these are things that the players have to do individually to help their teams.
The only that is a great point, and yeah, it pays to the play. There are so many players I think this really applies to on the Giants roster. Bring up Adoree Jackson, I think like Leonard Williams, but there's also I think something that the coaches can do to put the team in a better position. Like you bring up Atlanta, there's Joe Judge. I saw personally wasted 5 timeouts in that game, like 5 of them. Like there's, and in the Dallas game, that second at the end of the first half, when Dallas was like running the ball, going down the field to score a touchdown, they left only 40 seconds left, and Joe Judge kept all 3 of his timeouts in his pocket. And we brought it up earlier, but not going for it on 4th and 3 from the opponent's 39, and to kind of pull a Justin Pettick, like that play alone dropped the Giants' winning percentage by 5%. Like the Giants have the 7th worst are seventh worst in 4th and goal decisions, like according to Ben Baldwin's model. Like in terms of, it's 4th down, should you go for it, should you not? The Giants are 7th worst. They are also 7th most in points given up by not going for it or going for it. It's on the players, yes. They're the ones on the field doing things, but I feel like this coaching staff could put them in a much better position to win.
You know
right,
what?
and that's the point that I was trying to make is that some of the when we're talking about this coaching staff and we're talking about what this coaching staff is supposed to be good at, these are the things that I have questions about, because some of the decisions, and I know that it's a fast-paced game, right? I've kind of been in similar positions as a player, as a coach. You got to make a decision in a split second. You got to make a decision in a split second. But these are the things that should be fresh on your mind throughout the week. Okay, if we're in this position, what are we going to do? If we're in this situation, what are we going to do? And it almost seems like it's haphazard. It almost seems like no thought is put into these situational moments in the game that could determine the outcome of the game. And so that's kind of the reason why I have my reservations, or I have my feelings about this coaching staff, because when you preach preparation, when you preach execution, when you preach discipline, but then you go out on the field and you make decisions that really don't make sense. The guy that's sitting on the couch and the guy that's sitting on the couch is not qualified to be an NFL coach or to be in the NFL at all. I am not qualified to be an NFL coach or be in the NFL at all. But however, when we're sitting on the couch and we're like, hey man, you got 3 timeouts, use some of them. Like that, those are the things that frustrates me as a fan, because when you're preaching all these good things, but then you're not practicing, it makes the fan base question, are you giving us lip service, or are these the things that you are really considering as you are preparing for these games?
Right. I have a very nerdy question.
Sorry, I want to let Carl get a chance to answer that, because we're
Well, I got a coach. I have a coaching question, and it's a very nerdy question.
Okay.
So, Carl, I want to hear your input on the Giants have been running a lot more too high this year, and I think that's really, really impacted. It's a coaching decision on what scheme you kind of want to run. Running a lot more too high last year. Last year they ran a lot more single high with
Justin,
bringing guy in the box.
I know Carl knows a lot of football, but in case anybody doesn't know what that means, can you just break that down a little bit?
All right, sure. So this year, Giants are running a lot of too high safeties, which basically means like Xavier McKinney and Logan Ryan. They're playing further back from the line of scrimmage, kind of behind linebackers, where last year, a guy like Jabril Peppers, his snap share was increased last year. He was on the field a lot more because he was kind of like in the box around the line of scrimmage, making plays in the backfield, going in on blitzes, tackles for loss, QB pressures, QB hits, and sacks. He hasn't necessarily been given those opportunities this year. So, Carl, I think that's like a coaching thing. And, I really, that's the one realistically, the different thing that I've seen on the defense outside of the player execution. How much of an impact do you think is playing too high versus that extra man in the box impacting the run game, the pass rush, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, so it's a copycat league. And if you go back and you look, Justin, at the biggest plays, and the biggest plays on offenses right now are these deep over routes. They got killed by Denver with it. The Rams run it with Cooper Kupp. They take a slot receiver, even an outside receiver, and they put a little eye candy into that single high, and they pull somebody up, and you get a receiver that runs clear across the field, wide open, and everyone says, "Why? How did this guy get so open?" Because he just runs behind the guys in front. Playing too high or too deep safety gives the backside safety visibility to that. So what Patrick Graham is trying to do is eliminate that 60-yard bomb on an over route, because the over route is the most in vogue play right now for offenses going in the NFL. They get to it a lot of different ways, and when you go back and look at some of your film breakdowns on some of these big plays, it's always the over route. There's a guy who's running behind the defense, and it's somehow the single high safety gets caught up into some eye candy on the combo route intermediate and just forgets all about the over route. So that's why they're playing it. And I think it's a sound defense to play, especially given where teams like to get their yardage. Would you concede, a 7-yarder or a 10-yarder over a 70-yarder? Absolutely. So I think that's why they play that, because you want to have visibility from receivers crossing over the field. Now, the intermediate cover guys have to be better, and they have to know how to pattern read. They need to know where slot receivers are and carry some of that stuff so that safeties don't have so much stress. But when you get into the man, those are man coverage beaters. They're cover 4 beaters. Just getting that guy running clear across the field, and he just, you just lose track of him once he clears the hash mark. The safety is caught up in something else, single high safety, and the guy's just running scot-free. So it's an appropriate defense, the defense for what offenses are trying to do now. They just have to be better at it. And the thing is, we always hear, well, when a team goes cover 2, it's going to be an automatic run. That should not be automatic for offenses. Teams have to be able to play cover 2 and play the run out of it so that you can discourage it and then be able to play the pass as well. But we see it week in and week out. They get a team out. If a team goes cover 2, they're gonna run the football on them. As soon as they bring a guy in the box, they're gonna run that deep over route. So teams have to be more sound defensively in terms of how they execute whatever coverages are called, because there are run responsibilities in both, there are pass responsibilities in both. But it seems like a lot of defensive coordinators in the league are conceding, well, if we go cover 2, they're going to run it, but we'd rather have that than to have a receiver running through your defense. So it's schemes are only as good as the players' execution. And I have a lot of confidence in Joe Judge, and I've seen how they try to prepare these players. And this is not, listen, I will be the first to tell you, I'm not going to continuously bash a player who doesn't have the ability to do better, right? That's the only reason I do that. There are some guys who can't do certain things, and I get it, right? But there are certain guys who should have more impact, and I will bash that. Clock management for Joe Judge is certainly something he needs to do. But, the third down play against Atlanta where they end up punting it, if you fast forward 1 week after that, 2 weeks after that, the New Orleans game, Sean Payton went on TV and said that he regrets kicking that field goal and missing it. He should have punted the football. Those are not chip shots, right? And for the Giants, the data will tell you guys one thing, but for the Giants, they came back and scored as a result of that punt. They were able to get a stop, and they went down and drove the football with the game-winning or potential, which should have been the game-winning touchdown. So that decision wasn't a bad decision. You got to have a kind of a feel for it. And, let me just be clear on this. I'm not anti-analytic, but I do put a caveat out there that analytics don't have a heartbeat. And when I say that, if your offensive line can't run block, right? Or if your offensive line is struggling, most of the time when you need a play is when they normally break down. So if you have a feel for that and you feel better about your offense's chances of doing something if your defense gets a stop, which happened in that game, it didn't hurt the Giants. Because a missed field goal gives the Atlanta Falcons the ball basically at midfield. So now you miss your opportunity to score and go ahead in the game, and they can kick a field goal and win it. So these are the things that you have to consider when we say, it was a bad decision, bad coaching decision. No, it was probably the most appropriate decision given the result, the end result of it. And then I was on Patrick Graham in the Washington game, right? They go when you got the clock on your side and you go with a man coverage in 2 plays, 75 yards there in the end zone. I say to Patrick, why won't you play prevent defense? Make them earn it all the way up the field. They're burning clock. And at some point, you're going to get an opportunity because that's how your defense is built, to bend but don't break. But when you put a team, it may have been the right coverage for the personnel that they had on the field, but it wasn't the best coverage for the situation. Because when you get into these man coverages,
Did this end?
No, I guess Will's not here. Will, you here?
No, you hear me? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've been having some issues with my phone. There's one point that Carl made about that decision in the Atlanta game where they had the third down deep shot, and then then they decided to punt it on fourth down. That I think fans need to really hear, and that is, a lot of fans during that same game were calling for Jason Garrett's head and saying this guy can't call a play to save his life, and then all of a sudden we want to trust him to come up with a 4th and 3 at a critical point in the game. There is a little bit of a paradox in that, and I think we, I want to show that I really hear that. I obviously think the analytic counter to what a lot of Carl just said is analytics likes to emphasize the process over results, and it's not about whether it works out, it's about in the long run of more often than not if it's going to work out. And yes, I completely agree that the Atlanta decision did end up working out as well as it really could have. But that being said, I think there is room to question whether or not, if that happened 100 times, if it would end up being the right call. And then the last point that I'd also like to make with that, and this is also about where analytics probably falls short, is that it's not necessarily about the decision, it's also about conviction in the decision. And we've seen for a long time, Tom Brady and the Patriots able to pick up fourth downs just by by doing a QB sneak when everybody on the offense knows it's coming. And we've seen both Baltimore and the Chargers recently speak of having conviction in their identities as an offense in being able to pick up 4th and short and not even having to wait and say, are we going for it, and just going for it, and defense is being caught off guard. And analytics won't always capture that. And I think that makes going for it on 4th down even more compelling. So, I guess the long answer is, analytics isn't necessarily everything, but there are little ways that the team could be doing a better job to improve their probability that, we're not seeing. And I
That's fair.
I appreciate that. And Carl, I've asked this question before, and I think there's nobody whose opinion I'd rather get than yours. What I'm seeing in this defense, and cutting out, I apologize if you already answered that, but I don't really feel like this defense has an identity. I don't feel like it has one aspect of the game that it shows up and decides, we're not going to let you do X on us. We're not going to let you run the ball on early downs. We're not going to let you get to the outside. We're not going to let you, and maybe it's, we're not going to get beat deep, but do you see an identity that this defense can really hang their hats on?
No, because they're inconsistent and they don't tackle well. If you again, I'll go back to it. If you are allowing teams to run for 8, 9, 10, 11 yards on first down, and your first contact is at the line of scrimmage or behind it, then it's hard to have an identity. Your identity is that you can't tackle. That's their identity right now. They want to play tough, and like I said, they give you effort, but they're not purposeful in the things that they're doing. To this point, I do believe that has to get better, and they will. But at this point, it's just there are too many things that an offense can do to the Giants defense because they don't have the ability to create a negative play on a consistent basis. And in the times that they do that, when you see a 3rd and 8 or more, is when you see the Giants play their best football. But when they're getting these 3rd and 5s or less, it's whatever, it's dealer's choice pretty much. So they've got to be able to fundamentally improve before they get an identity, because right now their identity is a team that can't tackle, and that's why we're seeing the results that we're seeing.
But why can't they tackle? Like
that's an individual thing. The coaches, I know they teach it. They teach proper technique, and then from a schematic standpoint, you see guys in position to make the plays. That's the thing about it.
They don't make the plays. So is
right.
That
that's
part
the
of the
baffling thing about it.
So does this come down to, and I don't want to get granular with the analytics, but I'm just talking about the smell test or the C test. Is this just a case where you don't have a quality team across the board?
Well, again, they're inconsistent. You're playing with some backups, but again, tackling, I'll give you a case in point, right? The Dallas game. And I tweeted about this. So Ezekiel Elliott's running for the pylon twice, right? And your linebacker, he sprints his ass off to get over there only to push him into the end zone. And you contrast that with Daniel Jones running to the pylon. Their guys bust their ass to get over there and take his head off. So it's about intent. And if you can't commit to that, be intentional about what you do defensively, you're going to get the same results. Like I would be pissed off if I had to run as fast as I could to hit a guy and I stuck my hand out and pushed him. No, my teammates would be pissed off at me because you got a chance, one last chance to dislodge the ball and put the guy out to give yourself another down. And what you do is you stick out your hands like it's two-hand touch. That's not good defense.
But it
And
consistently happens. It happens on defense. It happens with dropped interceptions. It happens on
it's
offense.
intentional. That's my point. You've got to be intentional about what you do as a defensive player. Coaches can scheme it. They can do everything. A coach can't. There's no scheme that can scheme you out of a butt whooping. If you can't beat the guy in front of you, if you can't execute a ball that's thrown to you that you play perfectly all the way until you drop it, that's an individual thing. You've got to be intentional. So I'm not going to tell you they don't have good enough players. They don't have great players. They
don't have
got
alphas.
right, but that's a whole nother conversation.
So this can't be coached. This can't be taught or technique. This comes down to the players they
Individual
have
effort.
cannot execute when it counts.
And I want to I want to suggest an idea, and I'm curious to hear what Carl says. One line I've heard a lot, on Twitter certainly is, this isn't Madden. And I think that, that's something we have to remember. I mean, these are a lot of guys who are coming together and don't necessarily know how to trust each other and don't have the experience playing next to each other. And I think part of what gave me a lot of concern with the idea that the Giants would be ready to win now is they basically added a bunch of pieces to a recipe and assumed that recipe was just going to be able to take the next step. And I think that takes a little bit more than 4 or 5 games. And I know Carl, you've got experience. Do you think it's a situation where players aren't comfortable with the guys next to each other?
It's a matter of trust. But defense, like I said, it's a team effort, and they've got to learn to trust each other. But as the old saying goes from Bill Belichick, just do your job. If you do your job, the other guy won't have to think he has to do more than his job. Defense is about how the pieces come together, and I think that's the DNA of Patrick Graham. He understands that. He understands that if each guy does what he's supposed to do, you have a better chance of limiting the success of an offense. You minimize it. But when you got guys guessing and running all over the place, out of position, that's when the big plays come. So, yeah, they have to learn to trust each other. But your best players and your marginal players have to focus on doing their jobs.
Mr. Banks, I have a question because you talked about intent, right? You use the examples of Zeke running to the pylon, getting pushed out of bounds, whereas Daniel Jones gets his head knocked off. Now, and maybe this is just me, but I've always felt like that mentality and that intensity is a standard that's set by the coaches that are coaching you. If I am trying to motivate my players, or if I'm trying to motivate my teammates, someone has to set that tone of let's go out here and as I say, murder someone on the field. So are you saying that you don't think that the coach has to set that standard? The players have to set that standard? I mean, doesn't someone have to get that mentality through to the team?
Well, yeah, they call, like, if you start off a game, and this is something that I've seen Patrick Graham get better and more aggressive at, right? Instead of letting teams drive the ball on the first series of the game all the way to the red zone before you can get a stop, he's now being more aggressive in trying to call plays that set the tone game. But the players have to be that. The coach can scream, he can MF everybody, he can MF the opposing team, but your players, your best players, have to be able to step up and make plays. And again, they don't lack leadership on the field. They lack alpha mentality. And if a coach can't go out there and play, it's up to the players. And the one thing that I've had some conversations with some of my close friends is that when Dave Gettleman cleaned up this roster and he got some bad attitudes, I think at times, this is just my opinion, he overcorrected because he's got a lot of great character guys, right? And I don't advocate for bad people on rosters, but every once in a while you need that one guy, right? Who's ready to run through the brick wall. And this is not a knock on the guys that are there. They have to play better. They are who they are, right? In terms of their character. And you always want a team that has good character players. But when you overcorrect and you don't have that dog mentality, then you have to count on those guys that are on your roster being very good in fundamentals and doing the things that they're supposed to, because the bend but don't break means that at some point during the course of a series, you're going to have an opportunity. Teams, offenses that have long drives, and I don't know what the data says on it, but there will be opportunities within a long drive if you're limiting and making them work for it. But if you are not committed to that form of football as players because you don't have that impact player, then you're going to have the same result over and over again of just, you know.
So, Carl, you're saying something that I've kind of articulated myself a few times over the last few years, and I'm curious to hear if I say it again, if you'd find yourself agreeing with this. And I'm sorry, I've got the ambulance driving by me. I hope it's not interfering with what I'm trying to say. But
Way to go, Pest.
I've said there's a fine line between
Sorry, I got a little hyped.
There we go. On the field, Pest, on the field. But I've said there's a fine line where composure turns into complacency. And I feel like the Giants have been so scared of players who, lose their composure that they've just aired away from that line. And even guys like Landon Collins, who I would never say is a bad guy, but who was willing to call out Eli Apple and go on the radio spot and say, what's going on right now isn't working. Do you think that, that sentiment, would you agree with that?
Yeah, like team chemistry is a delicate balance, right? But when you have enough good players, all you need to do is have success on the field. But to your point, if you got that dog in your locker room and you got a lot of people willing to follow with that mentality, people start to play above their pay grade in some instances, and they are looking forward to making plays. And you see it in special teams a lot. The good team have guys who can set the tone. I think the Giants have guys who can set the tone. They've got to set their mind to it to do that. The two guys up front can set the tone. Xavier McKinney can set the tone in his own way. But these guys have to commit. They've got to be intentional about what they do. And right now, the frustration amongst you fans, and myself as well, because I'm a fan, is that they don't seem intentional about what they do. It's kind of a go along to get along. And then if something happens, it happens. They've got to.
Well, why wouldn't they be intentional? Like you're saying, they've got to be intentional about doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, that's why they're there. Why wouldn't they already have that within them to be intentional?
Well, they intend to be good. They like the idea of being intentional. But this is, success begets more success. Let me just put it that way. So if we can see a team that can commit to doing the little things, like making tackles for losses when they have the opportunity, then you'll see this team catch fire. No different than when Saquon Barkley put the team on his back in the New Orleans game. Now, and I say that, and there's no disrespect to Daniel Jones or Andrew Thomas, but here's a guy who made the decision. I'm going to do more with every opportunity I have, but I'm going to work within the scheme. He ran his routes, he called his footballs, and he made guys miss, right? And his energy became infectious. That's what you need. And it just takes one small play, right? When Saquon Barkley decides to follow his blockers, right? All of a sudden, he's getting 8-10 yards instead of leaving his blockers and getting, tackled for a loss. Those are the little things. You got to be intentional about it. And they intend to be intentional. But you've got to have a focus to be that. And that's the difference between good teams, average teams, and below average teams. Those are committed to being intentional every single down. That's what they have to be. You get to, a defense is called or an offense is called and there's a sideline pass, you got to catch it. Or in the Washington game, right? I don't think Slayton intended to drop the football, but he's got to catch it, right? Game over. Philadelphia game with Ingram, he didn't intend to drop that. He wanted to catch it, right? But you got to do it. You got to make that little extra effort to do it, and you've got to set your mind to it. And when they get to that point, I think you'll start to see it's a lot of games left in this season.
How long does it go before you're saying they gotta want to do it and they get the opportunity and they're not doing it? How long do you go on this path of they have to want to be intentional before you get to the point where you realize whether they want to be intentional or not, they're not intentional. we have to get another group in here. Like how long do we go
Well,
along this path?
you can't change the roster 53 men a year because you're in a perpetual rebuild. Here's what I can tell you. When you look at the college careers of some of the kids, right? Some of these kids hadn't lost games since elementary school. So in some of the programs they come from require them to be intentional about it. So I have the confidence that certain players on this roster will step up and take it to another level because they are that self-aware. And then the guys that aren't, they catch on pretty quick. They know that there's another level that they have to play at.
I hope so.
Well, we all. This has been fun, guys. And I'm sorry, I only wanted to make one comment.
It happens like that. Carl, before you leave, I wanted to say that I've gotten a direct message to tell you that a couple of our listeners feel very strongly that you deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. I would echo that myself, and thank you so much for your time to join us. It's an honor and a privilege.
Keep up the good work, guys. I'll be listening. I may not jump back on again, but you guys have some great topics. And just the fact that this platform that you have given the Giant fans to really articulate their frustrations, their concerns, their ideas, and every one of you guys that have spoken today has not been on some emotional rant. You've been very coherent and well thought out everything that you wanted to say, and that I can appreciate because sometimes we get into this Twitter space and it just becomes a human meltdown, and you don't solve anything. And you guys are about solutions here, so I applaud you as fans. And this is great. I just love listening to you guys because you're so coherent in everything you say, and the thought that goes into what you're saying tells me you're invested as fans, but you're invested more than at the level of fandom. You really want to see things get better, and you offer ideas of how they can change.
I can certainly really appreciate what you're saying, and I think I've found myself more emotionally at peace really using these Twitter Spaces, which has I've felt unheard for years, and I felt like this has given me a chance to to really articulate what I'm trying to say a lot better for people who don't want to necessarily read 4 pages about a draft a couple years ago. But I also want to say, Carl, that I think you come from a mentality where you're used to being in a locker room where you just block out the noise and you go about your business. And I think that you've tweeted from that mentality in the past and said basically like, shh, talk is cheap, play the game in so many words. And I think I might have in the past taken that as like as disrespectful when you're really just trying to be like players, it's up to you. And we're all on the same side here. Everybody here loves you, and really appreciate everything about you.
Well, I appreciate you guys as well.
All right, thanks, man. We'll look forward to listening to you on Sunday.
That was awesome.
Love you, Carl.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're much better, Carl, than me. 100%. You're the best.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure, Carl.
Pleasure.
So I think that's probably going to be the highlight of the night if we're losing, the soon-to-be Hall of Famer. But I've gotten a few questions sent to me. Unless anybody else wants to jump in with anything else, and we can kind of go to some of those and then close this out.
I just want to make one comment before I jumped off. First of all, that was awesome.
Right.
I think that he really got across all the concerns and put a pretty decent answer to it. I've enjoyed this as well. I'm really glad, and as I've said before, I love Will, I love Justin, I listen to Talking Giants a lot. One last thing, just a comedic point. I have a ticket free if anybody wants it for this Sunday. All you got to do is pay for a beer.
I love that.
So like $100.
I think the beer might be more expensive than the tickets before long.
Yeah, really.
Precisely.
Well, that's very nice. I know me and Justin are going to the game, but somebody should definitely take Greg up on that offer.
If it wasn't my wife's birthday this weekend, I would be in my car driving up to New Jersey right now.
Well, I'm glad your wife is. Hope she has a happy birthday.
Yeah, I mean, some things are a little more important, like the ability to live in my house peacefully.
Precisely. Right?
There are plenty of comfortable places to sleep in the parking lot. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, I thought you was going to offer me a spot, and I was going to say no one be in their house. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I don't mind you. I don't mind you in my house. I'm just not going to close my eyes around you.
Oh, Snacks, you're going to close your eyes because we're going to cuddle. Okay, we're cuddling
Well,
up.
I'm sure your wife's a lot better looking than me. So I don't know if you're interested in that, but
I just I kind of want to get a gauge on your guys' thoughts on this game. I was having a conversation with some folks on a podcast earlier. They were kind of talking about this schedule, right? Talking about whether or not we feel like this season is over. And it's way too early to really make that statement right now, right? Like I know that for a lot of us, it feels like this thing is done. But as Mr. Banks said, I feel so weird calling him by his first name. I don't know. It's just the way I was raised. But that, as he said, there's a lot of football left to be played. We got to take it game by game, right? So I kind of want to get a gauge of everyone who has the ability to speak. How are you guys feeling in regards to whether or not the season can be salvaged, or if you think that this is a wrap? Like, what do you guys think?
Fine.
Sorry, I'll go. I'll make it quick. Pest, I don't think it matters. Now we can share our opinions, but they're going to try to win football games, and we can worry about who the GM is going to be and if they're going to try to make deals before the deadline. But they're going to try to win football games, and I want them to try to win football games. I want to see, especially as this team begins to get healthy again, what they can be, especially the pieces that are still going to be here regardless of who the GM is going to be.
Yeah, I think, my first year watching football was 1995. That was the first year I really followed the NFL. And the Oakland Raiders in 95 started out 8-2, and they ended up 8-8 and didn't make the playoffs. And, our schedule sets up in a way that weird things can happen. We have a gauntlet coming up, and it's possible we could end up being like a 1-7 team that ends up being like 9-8. It's possible. So, I've always kind of, I joke, I mentioned that this game's a must win, but I've always kind of joked that if you have to ask, is this a must win? Then by definition, no, it's not a must win. And I think as this, the coaching staff will have a real opportunity at the back half of the year to make some improvements. And I know we're all sick of, starting the year basically eliminating ourselves and making cosmetic improvements and using that as a reason to justify keeping a status quo. And we have a question about that I'll get to in a second. But I think, with 7 teams making the playoffs, it's not over until it's really, really, really over.
I will. That's obviously a great point, and I have no rebuttal to that. Mike, real quick, and I most of the time I talk in here, and I want everybody to talk that I just bitch and moan all the time. But you're exactly right. They want to win. Whatever the GM happens with the GM, we all want to win. I think that's safe to say. Out of all the disagreements and all the vitriol that goes back on Giants Twitter back and forth with the GM and whatnot and the coaches and everything, I think at the end of the day, we all want to win. We're all going to go Sunday. We're all going to root our asses off. We're all going to pray for a win. Do the gods look like they're in our favor this week with all the injuries and everything? No, probably not. But we've seen crazier things happen before. And like Will said, there is a gauntlet of a schedule right here. But we saw last year, nobody thought we'd go into Seattle, Colt McCoy playing quarterback and steal a win in Seattle in that crowd and that environment. So you never know what exactly is going to – I don't think the season's over yet, no. But I do want to see improvement game to game against those better teams and hang with those better teams and then find yourself stealing one. Because like Will said again, the schedule does – ease up, and with 7 teams in the playoffs, you never do know. But moral of the story is the players definitely want to win. The organization obviously wants to win, and we all want the same thing, which is a win. So,
I had one other question, and it's just I'm very interested. Jesse Gary, you are currently in California, correct?
Yes, sir, in the Silicon Valley.
Okay. Do you find that there's a lot of New York Giants fans out there?
Not a lot, no, but they're out here. I mean, I last time I went to a game at San Francisco 49ers Stadium, there were Giants fans there and et cetera, but it's not a lot, and we're spread out.
Okay. Yeah, I used to live in San Diego. Okay. There was a decent amount of Giants fans there. So I was just curious as to what part of California you were at, and what's your experience?
Yeah,
up there?
Northern California, and it's hard to find like-minded football fans. I run into unfortunately, a lot of Eagle fans, and that's kind of what actually led me to this tonight, because one of the things I wanted to say earlier to Mr. Banks was, I hear what you're saying, but this idea of losing to the Eagles every year, the idea of losing to the Cowboys every year, I'm at my wit's end. I'm pulling my hair out. I cannot take the losing. I mean, let me put it this way: having a losing record is one thing, but losing to the Eagles every year, I can't take it.
I'm sorry. There's no way there are Eagles fans that are smart enough to live in Silicon Valley. Like, are they like the janitors?
Believe it or not,
They work in
mechanics?
security.
Okay,
believe it or
there's
not,
just no way Facebook is hiring Eagles
no,
fans. No.
But my ex-wife and son are in Philadelphia, and so I have to go visit him. I go visit him 4 or 5 times a year, and so I'm in Philadelphia, and I get no rest. I mean, I can't. It's horrible. It's just I cannot take this losing to the Eagles, and particularly the ways we lose to the Eagles. Drop passes, punt to Deshaun Jackson, yada yada yada. I just want it to stop that aspect of it. I want that aspect to show improvement. Whether or not they get to an 11 and whatever record, or 12 and how many games they have, 12-7 record, just get me to the point where they're not losing to the Eagles and the Cowboys, and then we can.
Well, Jesse, you came to the right place. This is kind of the first time that I've seen you in these Twitter spaces. But you come to the right place. There's a lot of content creators here. Justin is one. Giants Rush is another. I'm just kind of looking because there's a lot of really good content creators. We're fostering a real good community here. These Twitter spaces at least twice a week. So like your questions are great, and from somebody who can kind of give us a gauge from the other side of the nation. Definitely want you around here more.
Well, I'll be here more because like I said, I'm pulling my hair out, and I saw this pop up on the alert, and I said I have to jump in and listen and say something because I'm bouncing off the walls this is October, just the middle of October, and you asked the question, is the season already over? Well, yeah, I feel like the season's over. 1-4 going against the Rams this weekend. Yeah, so I feel like the season's over. The Yankees are done. Who knows what the Islanders and Rangers will be? Who knows what the Knicks and Nets will be?
Low blow on the Yankees part because some of us are still mourning over that. But I can promise you.
I'm still mourning.
We're all
mourning. I'm mourning over their loss, and I'm mourning over the fact that Satan's team actually beat the Rays. So I'm apoplectic.
That's the worst.
Yes.
It's not fun. And who would have thought that we live in a day where the Knicks might be the functional organization in New York?
Thank you. The Knicks are the thing you hang your hat on.
All right, it's crazy. I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest. Going back on mute.
All right, sorry.
Hey, I just want to say something real quick.
But sorry.
I got to jump off. I got to get my lift in here real quick. But I just want to thank you guys for these spaces too, because I'm out here in Washington State, like the Seattle area, and no one wants to talk Giants football. So these spaces give me that opportunity to vent, talk to other like-minded football people as well. So I know exactly how Jesse is feeling, being out there estranged. And so yeah, I appreciate this. And as far as the season goes, I just want to see some good football, and I'm going to get off the phone. I'm going to get on the phone a little bit and tell my dad that I was just talking to Carl Banks and he's going to lose his shit. So you guys have a good night.
We appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
So one question that I'm seeing in my DMs from a few different people, and I want to pose this to everyone as we start to wrap up, is do we think that the rash of injuries is going to be basically a caveat that's going to let the ownership decide not to make aggressive changes?
Better not be.
Oh God, I hope not.
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Because I think especially with Saquon, and it's just I think Saquon just hammers in the point that I imagine ownership has been hearing over the years of that. Running back is the most injury-prone, replaceable position in sports. And in terms of Dave Gettleman, probably not, but maybe Joe Judge, Jason Garrett, maybe. But your starting quarterback and left tackle are out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
Will, I think you brought us all to your side of the fence, Will, with the Saquon thing. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can follow me and know that I'm not, content with being right. I am still viscerally upset. But I want fans to understand that
that we need more. Because the question comes up is, are we happy if the Giants keep Barkley around at a much at a lower price? And I just don't think that's possible because I cynically refer to him as a mascot, in that he's here for off field reasons as like a face of a franchise, and he's fulfilled his role in that respect so well that I think it's impossible to keep him on the roster unless he's a huge part of the team, and it's really hard to see this working out.
You know what's funny is someone said to me today that they feel like the Saquon pick was a move to put butts in the seats, kind of the way Odell Beckham Jr. was putting butts in the seats. And I've never quite thought about it like that until tonight. And it kind of put a lot of things in perspective for me because, we bring a guy here. We bring a guy here who has the look, right? He's got the attitude. He's got the talent. But is he helping us win? That's something that you say a lot, Will, is he helping us win? And he's kind of not. Like, he's kind of not. And it's frustrating because we all want Saquon to be great, right? We all want to have that player that everyone else is jealous of. And it felt like with having a Saquon Barkley, we would finally have, because obviously everybody was jealous of Odell Beckham Jr. Everybody wanted Odell Beckham Jr. And then he was gone. And so it's like, all right, well, we potentially have another player that people are jealous of.
Keep the timeline right because, Odell was hurt in 2017, and then they drafted Saquon and extended him, and extended Odell the year that they drafted Saquon. So they had a year together.
Well, right, yeah, they had that year together, but it looking back on it, it still felt like one of those kind of butts in the seats move. Like, hey, now we've got this other player that people could potentially be jealous of and talking about New York market. We can put him on billboards and we can have him in commercials and doing all this stuff. And I've never quite thought about it like that until someone said it tonight, and I was like, you know what? That kind of makes a lot of sense. That may not be the case, right? Like we watched Saquon in college tear it up. We saw that he had all this talent and we thought that he could help this team be better. But it still kind of makes sense that we would take a player like that at that point in the draft.
I think I'm going to have to disagree with that thought process.
That's fine. I'm not saying that thought process is correct or not.
I'll explain why, and this kind of goes back to a lot of the people who started these Twitter space groups. Their perspective and their point of view was that I believe that Barkley wasn't like a marketing pick. It was because they evaluated and were trying to win with that roster. They were trying to extend Eli Manning's career. They were trying to make another run, and they saw Solder and then a second round guard is fixing the O-line, and you're gonna bring in this amazing running back, and the running game was horrendous leading up to that point, and you're going to pair it with Manning, and you're going to pair it with Beckham and Shepard and Ingram, and you fix the O-line, and off we go. And it was obviously a mistake.
So let me jump in because I think I feel certainly addressed by this, and I think what Pest and Mike saying are both right. Because everything that Mike's saying about running it back and really not learning the lessons at the 3-13 season was needed more than cosmetic changes to really find the sustained success that Gettleman said he promised. That's all true. But to Pest's point, I've very, very strongly felt like when the Giants drafted Barkley, they had a conversation, or at least had like an unspoken understanding that worst case scenario, everything goes wrong. And I don't think anybody thought worst case scenario would lead us to where we are today. But worst case scenario, fans are going to love this guy. And frankly, as somebody who saw this, as somebody who was against this for 3 years and who said that, look, at least trade down. There were things, big picture failures that I very much acknowledged. Part of why I'm so personally, viscerally, hostile, to, Saquon's place on the team is because I feel like from day one, it's a consolation prize. And I feel like it insults my intelligence to see him celebrated. And when I see the Giants Twitter account says 2 years ago, we drafted this guy, I basically see the unspoken thing. And yeah, I'm a nut and I take this way too personally. And that's all, 100% true. But I see the other piece of this is and we knew that you'd be reacting this way. And that's why I'm saying no. I'm digging my heels down. I want everyone to know that it's more than about somebody's star power. And the other part of this that hurt me, I guess, and not hurt me, but that hasn't sat right with me is Barkley's been the only Giant who's ever been a superstar from the moment he showed up here. Everybody else has basically earned it. Even Eli Manning, who was drafted number 1 overall, he had to win the starting job, and he he had to suffer through bad times. The Giants tweeted a couple years ago, like picking an all-star Giants lineup, and they had Barkley's name listed over Joe Morris and Ahmed Bradshaw, and it's like just because you invested in this guy and decided to make him the face of the franchise, that doesn't mean he's one of the greatest all-time New York Giants. And I take that much more personally than I should, but I take that very personally.
Right, I'm not saying that I believe in the statement that I'm saying. I'm simply saying that it does make sense. Like it does. It may not be true. It may not be real. I don't know. I'm not in the facility. I have no ties to a single person inside of that building. Okay, so I'm not saying that this is true and this is fact. I'm just saying it kind of makes sense if you're looking at this from the standpoint of, this football team is a business. We're in the business of making money. You make money by winning, yes, but you also make money by star power.
Well, Past, I actually do want to bring one thing up, and this is almost supporting your point. I remember that draft party. I was there. Those people celebrated that thing like lunatics, and it made no sense to me from a team building standpoint. So I think you may have a slight point there, but everything else, as far as Will said, is 1,000% spot on. It made no
I also
sense.
think if you go back to the state of the team back in 2017, there was a huge quote-unquote culture with the type of players that the Giants had on the roster. And Saquon, as a person, I guess, checked all the boxes for ownership, for Gettle to fix that perceived culture problem. And I think that ties into the whole point Pest made before.
Yeah, I didn't see that draft because I was in Iraq. I saw the draft pick, and I smiled and I jumped up because there was, I wanted Quentin Nelson, but I knew we were taking Saquon, and I was okay with that too. But I really wanted Quentin Nelson, and so like, but as I sit here today, years later, and I really think about it, I mean, it makes sense, right? It's New York City, big city, bright lights. We got to have a marquee guy. We've got Odell Beckham Jr., but what if we had another marquee guy that we can put on
And
billboards?
it goes back though to the question of the Giants weren't willing to ask themselves all the questions they needed to ask themselves. They didn't interview the right people who were going to ask them, okay, does it take more than looking at one guy doing everything right on the field, dazzling fans, and everything else falls into place? Like I think, in a lot of ways they thought it would be that simple. And and I don't want to dive back into a big hole, but you keep hearing Mara say like, I'm running out of patience. But it feels like it was just like he was running out of patience of losing and was doing it and was trying to shortcut it the best way he could.
It was like a knee-jerk reaction.
Because the owner is saying, I want to see something turn around quickly. And so this is the quickest route to that, where you have a guy who has, an electric ability on the field, and he's also marketable. If you're in a major market, LA, New York, Chicago, et cetera, you're going to want marketable people. So it does make sense that it's both.
I actually want to bring this up back to the question that was answered, the question that was asked specifically, do we think the injuries will impact Dave Gettleman being fired? As far as a more specific answer to that, there are two things he said, if you remember, this offseason, John Mara. He said he sanctioned the free agent spending because he was sick of losing, and he said that he would not judge Dave until the end of the year, when he would walk off the field last game of the year and he would have to ask himself, does he think he have the pieces of a Super Bowl winning
Which for
team?
the record, everything until the last two questions were what he said in 2019.
Well, yeah, I'm just making that clear specifically with that question, with the injury question. So the reason why I'm pointing that out is because all you can do is take him at his word. If the injuries really mattered, or if they didn't matter to a point where you were building out a full roster, I don't think Dave can answer that question and say that you can bring back Dave, or John can answer that question and say you can bring back Dave Gettleman. I just don't think you can say it.
Well, also, thankfully, most of these injuries are not going to be long lasting. Like Jones it seems to be on pace to play Sunday potentially, and Barkley's going to be a couple weeks, and Galladay's going to be week to week, and Shepard is playing. So, unless the injuries continue to happen, these guys are all going to be back.
Yeah, and
Thomas
also
did surgery on his foot,
and also
and
Greg,
it's still acting up.
Greg, and what it boils down to too is that Thomas is week to week and Galladay's week to week, and you can you can pinpoint some things that are happening that are going wrong too, but just the rest of the roster is just pitiful. It's pitiful, and I just go back to the edge room. My brain goes back to the edge room, that there was no substantial investment in that edge rusher room throughout all of Dave Gettleman's years, and the only substantial investment that they had this year was in a 21, 22-year-old player who has looked promising to start, but we should not be putting the world of expectations on. And Patrick Graham this summer stood there and cried about Lorenzo Carter's recovery and development, and that you could feel investment in your players, but I mean, we're going to look back on that 5 years from now, and I think we're going to have a little bit of a laugh that Patrick Graham actually cried over that guy's development and recovery from surgery. So there's a lot of other areas in which, like Willis talked about it over and over again, where 2018's impact wasn't necessarily going to always be felt in 2018, but 2018 and the mistakes that were made there, they're going to be felt in 2020. They're going to be felt in 2021. And that is exactly kind of like what's happening here, that Nate Solder has stuck around for all these years and is still having a negative impact. The 2018 draft class, not a single one outside of Will Hernandez maybe is somebody that you could possibly bring back. So all those things. And Greg, I know you disagree with that statement that you made, but it's such a good one because it's a conversation that ownership and management is having together. With all the injuries, is this season still legit? Can we run this back one more time? They're having it.
And that would drive me up.
And I will also echo.
So it's.
I'll also echo the point. I think Mike's point that some of these injuries aren't necessarily season-ending injuries is very important. But I want to also say something again that I said earlier in this Spaces event, which is in 2018 at the end of the year, when he was asked, okay, you started 1-7, and then once the pressure was off, you won a few games against back-to-backs. Does it cheapen anything? And Gettleman's like, no, you play who you play, and we won those games. So if he wants to take credit for beating backup quarterbacks, then he has to take the blame when the Giants are also banged up. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I also want to remember that 2017, when Ben and Jerry were finally fired, Odell Beckham, Dwayne Harris, and Brandon Marshall. I tweeted about this the other day. Like 3 of their best wide receivers, 3 of their best outside linebackers, their best cornerback in Janoris Jenkins, 3 of their best interior linemen. All these guys were on IR. So if you're going to fire a guy with 2 Super Bowl rings, when and obviously there's the Eli benching thing, and there are other extenuating circumstances. But if you can fire those guys in the middle of the season with all these injuries going on, then you can also do it to someone who's long overdue, and you're basically holding on to with hope.
I think to also piggyback on that point, I mean, if we're going to evaluate Dave Gettleman, right? If you look back at all the draft picks Gettleman has made, apart from maybe 3 first-round picks, right? Thomas, maybe Daniel Jones, and maybe Kadarius Toney. I mean, Toney has a small sample size. What draft picks do you see here on a second contract that Dave Gettleman's made? Maybe Will Hernandez, and even then, that's not a position that you can't upgrade.
Dexter Lawrence, maybe.
Maybe Dexter Lawrence, and then if you talk about Dexter Lawrence, you go back to the conversation: was he worth the 17th pick of the draft?
Right? Yeah, I mean, I think that there's nothing that Dexter Lawrence has done wrong, but I don't think there's anything that Dexter Lawrence has done that Dalvin Tomlinson didn't also do.
I just want to say that I love Dexter Lawrence, and so it's crazy because people always talk about Dalvin Tomlinson leaving, and I don't necessarily think that Dalvin Tomlinson was so good at he made everyone better. I think that the 3 of those guys with Thomas, Dexter, and Big Cat, I think the 3 of those guys together were the recipe, right? And so when one piece of the recipe leaves, the food don't taste so good. So it's just crazy because I kind of focus on different parts of the game when I watch, at least for the second time, right? When I watch it live, I just watch the game. When I watch the games a second or a third time, I'm looking at very specific things. And so like I feel like Dexter is someone who we could keep around. I feel like Will Hernandez is someone that we could keep around. And I don't necessarily have many issues with Dave Gettleman's early round picks. I have issue with Dave Gettleman's mid-round picks because that's where you're supposed to make your money. And our mid-round picks have been terrible. The only mid-round pick that I can look at and say, man, I kind of wish he was still here was B.J. Hill. I like B.J. Hill from a standpoint of what he brought to the table. But aside from that, these mid-round picks haven't been hit, and that's where you got to make your money as a GM. That's just my opinion.
So that's a good point, but this is somebody brought up earlier. We're kind of beating a dead horse. We all want to fire Gettleman. This is kind of where we're we're preaching to the choir here.
By the way, I think a "We Want
but what
Changes"
I'm
chant would go a long way in the stadium on Sunday.
Yeah,
I actually
that
want to
would.
talk about that real
But dude,
fast.
there are so many old geezers that don't care and whatever.
Yeah.
But what I am curious of, and because it's October and let's get fucking spooky. So I think when Gettleman was hired, he was asked do you think we can win with Eli Manning? And he said yes, and then he got the job. Do you think the next GM that we bring in is going to be asked hey, do you think we can win with Daniel Jones? And that's how he gets the job. That scares me to death. I am bullish on Dan, but that scares me to death.
I think he might be asked going to keep Joe Judge, but that's just me.
It depends on when they hire him. Are they axing both at the end? Are they axing firing both people at the end?
Or
of the season?
are they going to use Judge maybe to be part of the search and kind of handpick his GM?
I think it depends on what's certainly on what's shown, and I think that could certainly be a jumping off point to talk about the empty promises and the broken promises that Gettleman's made, and the other piece of this conversation is the failure of certain members of the media who've accommodated him moving the goalposts. I mean, I remember I pick on Ralph Vacciano a lot in here, but I'll do it again. And in 2018, he was talking about he was talking about Eli Manning having a career year in completion percentage and saying that it made a lot of sense to keep him around. Okay, so then in 2019, the Giants decided to spend $17 million more dollars, which obviously comes out of the defense that ends up being at the very, very bottom of the league, to keep Eli Manning around, and then bench him after 2 weeks. Ralph's only commentary on that is, okay, you think this is Eli Manning's fault? You think if he were playing better, they'd be winning? No, I think the team should be making a rebuilding effort. And then he says it's a knee jerk reaction to look at holding Dave Gettleman accountable. And now 2 years later, he's saying okay, now we really need to keep him around for one more year to let Dave Gettleman's vision get a chance to be seen through. It's it misleads the general public, and I find I take it as a personal responsibility to let people know that that's not necessarily what he's always had to say.
I mean, there's a responsibility from the media to hold people in power accountable. I mean, that's a whole idea, the fourth estate, right? And I know, when you see fourth estate, you're thinking Spotlight, Washington Post is going to break the big story about, a crazy scandal in the White House. But, it's sports. We care about it. We're having a spaces that was once over 450 people on a Wednesday night talking about this stupid game where a person throws a football and another person catches it. And the people that are in charge of those teams that we care so much about need their feet held to the fire when they really screw up. And to Will's point, there are a lot of people that just will, throw some ice on those feet, and it's very annoying.
Because we're so far removed from that whole fourth estate thing, especially sports media. I mean, I guess any media really. It's just now about dollars and getting engagements and getting clicks and getting subscriptions, and now is every single person like that? No, but that's what it's about. It is there to make money.
Yeah, and I think I understand we talk about Dave Gettleman's self-preservation as a media writer. If somebody's is connected and is giving you stories, you're not going to want to criticize them. But if it's as transparent as it's been in this situation, and it's coming at the expense of perpetuating and enabling perpetual mediocrity, that's where it becomes a problem. So I think it's a good time as ever for closing statements. If everybody, I know there are some people who've been waiting to speak for a while, and I'm sorry, we've kind of been crowded in here. But I'm going to try to let a bunch of the people who've been asking to speak
chime in, with one thought, but also come in right now and say this was a lot of fun again. Having Carl Banks in here was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in my life as a Giants fan. I see a lot of people who, I know haven't always necessarily agreed with me. I know we all want the same thing, I hope, which is, the Giants to be winning. And thank you, everybody, for, listening or speaking, everybody added to this being what it is.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Carl and I certainly have had an interesting relationship the last 2 years, and it was great to finally get to speak to him and talk some football with him. And it's always great to get together with everybody else and talk football with all of you. So we'll see you soon, and we'll do this again soon, just like we said we would do last time.
I definitely look forward to doing it soon. You guys are all great. I do feel bad that not everybody got to say anything, but I hope it was good conversation to listen to. And Will, like you said, Carl Banks being in here and talking as much as he did, because his first statement was maybe 30 seconds, and he goes, "Okay, I'll hang up and listen for the rest of the night," and then he kept going, which was amazing. But Will, thanks for putting it together again. Thank you, everybody, for listening, talking. Go Giants.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot that this was my Twitter, my border picture up top. Go check that if you want to laugh in terms of getting some context around Carl's and I's interesting relationship.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so much for coming and hanging out with us. This was amazing. To echo Will's point, one of the coolest things in my life to get to listen to Carl Banks kind of break down some X's and O's. I've been wanting to have a conversation with that man for so long, and I hope and pray that I can one day. Thank you to Will for putting this together as always. Man, I love this community. I love what we're doing. I love that we can come together and talk. I love you guys. So I hope guys and girls. Sorry. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your week, and we will catch you guys in the next Twitter space or on our respective platforms when we're doing podcasts and videos and live streams and stuff. So everybody.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Will, Justin. This was so cool. I mean, now I get to tell my dad that I talked to Carl Banks, so he can officially suck it. And yeah, this is really cool. I'm happy you guys all got to listen to my incoherent rambling, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys for letting me be a part of this and putting it together. It's awesome. It was always a highlight of the week. It's awesome. And also, we got some wide receiver injuries, unfortunately, but I'm going to be hoping for the pride of West Virginia. David Sills gets his debut and called up from the practice squad. Just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Good night, everybody. And if you just got to speaking, I wanted to give you guys a chance. I'm sorry I didn't get to include you guys more. I was trying to do the best I can. I could.
I think Mike's point that some of these injuries aren't necessarily season-ending injuries is very important. But I want to also say something again. The injuries is very important. But I want to also say something again that I said earlier in this Spaces event, which is in 2018 at the end of the year, when he was asked, okay, you started 1-7, and then once the pressure was off, you won a few games against back-to-backs. Does it cheapen anything? And Gettleman's like, no, you play who you play, and we won those games. So if he wants to take credit for beating backup quarterbacks, then he has to take the blame when the Giants are also banged up. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I also want to remember that 2017. When Ben and Jerry were finally fired, Odell Beckham, Dwayne Harris, and Brandon Marshall, I tweeted about this the other day, like 3 of their best wide receivers, 3 of their best outside linebackers, their best cornerback in Janoris Jenkins, 3 of their best interior linemen, all these guys were on IR. So if you're going to fire a guy with 2 Super Bowl rings when and obviously there's the Eli benching thing and, there are other extenuating circumstances, but if you can fire those guys in the middle of the season, with all these injuries going on, then you can also do it to someone who's long overdue and you're basically holding on to with hope.
I think to also piggyback on that point, I mean, if we're going to evaluate Dave Gettleman, right, if you look back at all the draft picks Gettleman has made, apart from maybe 3 first-round picks, right, Thomas, maybe Daniel Jones, and maybe Kadarius Toney. I mean, Toney has a small sample size. What draft picks do you see here on a second contract that Dave Gettleman's made? Maybe Will Hernandez, and even then, that's not a position that you can't upgrade.
Dexter Lawrence, maybe.
Maybe Dexter Lawrence, and then if you talk about Dexter Lawrence, you go back to the conversation: was he worth the 17th pick of the draft?
Right? Yeah, I mean, I think that there's nothing that Dexter Lawrence has done wrong, but I don't think there's anything that Dexter Lawrence has done that Dalvin Tomlinson didn't also do.
I just want to say that I love Dexter Lawrence, and so it's crazy because people always talk about Dalvin Tomlinson leaving, and I don't necessarily think that Dalvin Tomlinson was so good at he made everyone better. I think that the 3 of those guys with Thomas, Dexter, and Big Cat, I think the 3 of those guys together were the recipe, right? And so when one piece of the recipe leaves, the food don't taste so good. So it's just crazy because I kind of focus on different parts of the game when I watch, at least for the second time, right? When I watch it live, I just watch the game. When I watch the games a second or a third time, I'm looking at very specific things. And so like I feel like Dexter is someone who we could keep around. I feel like Will Hernandez is someone that we could keep around. And I don't necessarily have many issues with Dave Gettleman's early round picks. I have issue with Dave Gettleman's mid-round picks because that's where you're supposed to make your money. And our mid-round picks have been terrible. The only mid-round pick that I can look at and say, man, I kind of wish he was still here was B.J. Hill. I like B.J. Hill from a standpoint of what he brought to the table. But aside from that, these mid-round picks haven't been hit. And that's where you got to make your money as a GM. That's just my opinion.
So that's a good point. But this is somebody brought up earlier. We're kind of beating a dead horse. We all want to fire Gettleman. This is kind of we're screaming to. We're preaching to the choir here.
By the way, I think a "We Want Changes" chant would go a long way in the stadium on Sunday.
Yeah,
I actually want to talk about that real
quick. But dude,
fast.
there are so many old geezers that don't care and whatever.
Yeah.
But what I am curious of, and because it's October and let's get fucking spooky. So I think when Gettleman was hired, he was asked, like, do you think we can win with Eli Manning? And he said yes, and then he got the job. Do you think the next GM that we bring in is going to be asked, like, hey, do you think we can win with Daniel Jones? And that's how he gets the job? That scares me to death. I am bullish on Dan, but that scares me to death.
I think he might be asked going to keep Joe Judge, but that's just me.
It depends on when they hire him. Like, are they axing both at the end of are they axing, like, firing both people at the end of the season?
Or are they going to use Judge maybe to be part of the search and kind of handpick his GM?
I think it depends on what's certainly on what's shown, and I think that could certainly be a jumping off point to talk about the empty promises and the broken promises that Gettleman's made, and the other piece of this conversation is the failure of certain members of the media who've accommodated him moving the goalposts. I mean, I remember, I pick on Ralph Vacciano a lot in here, but I'll do it again. And in 2018, he was talking about he was talking about Eli Manning having a career year in completion percentage and saying that it made a lot of sense to keep him around. Okay, so then in 2019, the Giants decided to spend 17 million more dollars, which obviously comes out of the defense that ends up being like at the very, very bottom of the league. To keep Eli Manning around and then bench him after 2 weeks. Ralph's only commentary on that is, okay, you think this is Eli Manning's fault? Like, you think, if he were playing better, they'd be winning? No, I think the team should be making a rebuilding effort. And then he says it's a knee jerk reaction to look at holding Dave Gettleman accountable. And now 2 years later, he's saying, okay, now we really need to keep him around for one more year to let Dave Gettleman's vision, get a chance to be seen through. It's it misleads the general public, and I find, I take it as a personal responsibility to let people know that that's not necessarily what he's always had to say.
I mean, there's a responsibility from the media to hold people in power accountable. I mean, that's a whole idea, the fourth estate, right? Like, and I know, like, when you see fourth estate, you're thinking like, Spotlight, Washington Post is going to break the big story about, a crazy scandal in the White House, but it's sports. We care about it. We're having a spaces that was once over 450 people on a Wednesday night talking about this stupid game where a person throws a football and another person catches it, and the people that are in charge of those teams that we care so much about need their feet held to the fire when they really screw up. And to Will's point, there are a lot of people that just will, throw some ice on those feet, and it's very annoying.
Because we're so far removed from that whole fourth estate thing, like especially sports media. I mean, I guess any media really. It's just now about dollars and getting engagements and getting clicks and getting subscriptions, and now is every single person like that? No, but that's what it's about. It is there to make money.
Yeah, and I think, I understand we talk about Dave Gettleman's self-preservation as a media writer. If somebody's, is connected and, he's giving you stories, you're not going to want to criticize them. But if it's as transparent as it's been in this situation, and it's coming at the expense of, perpetuating and enabling perpetual mediocrity, that's where it becomes a problem. So I think it's a good time as ever for for closing statements. If everybody, I know there are some people who've been waiting to speak for a while, and I'm sorry, we've kind of been crowded in here. But I'm going to try to let a bunch of the people who've been asking to speak chime in, with one thought. But also come in right now and say this was a lot of fun again. Having Carl Banks in here was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in my life as a Giants fan. I see a lot of people who I know haven't always necessarily agreed with me. I know we all want the same thing, I hope, which is, the Giants to be winning. And thank you, everybody, for, listening or speaking. Everybody added to this being what it is.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Carl and I certainly have had an interesting relationship the last 2 years, and it was great to finally get to speak to him and, talk some football with him. And it's always great to get together with everybody else and talk football with all of you. So we'll see you soon, and we'll do this again soon, just like we said we would do last time.
I definitely look forward to doing it soon. You guys are all great. I do feel bad that not everybody say anything, but I hope it was good conversation to listen to. And Will, like you said, Carl Banks being in here and talking as much as he did, because his first statement was maybe 30 seconds, and he goes, "Okay, I'll hang up and listen for the rest of the night." And then he kept going, which was amazing. But Will, thanks for putting it together again. Thank you, everybody, for listening, talking. Go Giants.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot that this is my Twitter, my border picture up top. Go check that if you want to laugh in terms of getting some context around Carl's and I's interesting relationship.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so much for coming and hanging out with us. This was amazing. To echo Will's point, one of the coolest things in my life to get to listen to Carl Banks kind of break down some X's and O's. I've been wanting to have a conversation with that man for so long, and I hope and pray that I can one day. Thank you to Will for putting this together as always. Man, I love this community. I love what we're doing. I love that we can come together and talk. I love you guys. So I hope guys and girls. Sorry. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your week, and we will catch you guys in the next Twitter space or on our respective platforms when we're doing podcasts and videos and live streams and stuff. So everybody.
I guess I'll go. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Will, Justin. This was so cool. I mean, now I get to tell my dad that I talked to Carl Banks, so he can officially suck it. And yeah, this is really cool. I'm happy you guys all got to listen to my incoherent rambling, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys for letting me be a part of this and putting it together. It's awesome. It was always highlight of the week. It's awesome. And also, we got some wide receiver injuries, unfortunately, but I'm going to be hoping for the pride of West Virginia. David Sills gets his debut and called up from the practice squad. Just going to put that out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Good night, everybody. And if you just got to speaking, I wanted to give you guys a chance. I'm sorry I didn't get to include you guys more. I was trying to do the best I can. I could.